Thanks for coming to the Warrant Committee this evening. Nice to see you all. We have a very full agenda, but I'll do my best to get us through it. If you ever feel like we're rushing at all, please just slow me down. Why don't we start with the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes from December 14th, 2016.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous? No opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. I want to refer to the timeline that Julia sent out to everybody. That is thrilling. It's going to be a busy next couple of months, unfortunately. Oh, before I do that, Susan, why don't you do your thing? Susan is here to swear in, I think it's 2 members of the Warrant Committee who haven't been able to make it upstairs. And if Lucinda comes, I'll send her up your way. I'm sorry about that, Susan. So it wasn't written on my sheet, so I forgot.
So it's Mark and Jonathan. So if I could just ask the two of you to stand and raise your right hand. Okay, do you solemnly swear to perform your duties to the best of your ability, to uphold the bylaws of the town of Milton and the general laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the Constitution of the United States, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, and then if you could get that paperwork to me as soon as possible.
Can we email the
Please do,
and the
yes.
certificate too?
Yep, and the email is that we want you to make, the email to
Oh,
us right
okay,
there.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
So Jonathan and Mark just got their conflict of interest forms, but a couple of us need to renew them. They're due to be renewed every 2 years, so mine is up as well, and I'll go and renew mine. And if the rest of you who just got packets handed out to you can do that, I would appreciate it, and you'll be all squared away with Susan. All right, so looking at the schedule that was put together, which always does flux just a little bit, we are looking right now at having received yesterday, January 11th, right on time, the warrant to the Warrant Committee. So the selectmen approved most of the articles that are non-financial that will appear on the warrant last night. We'll go through those in a minute. There was one missing from the Fire Space Needs Study Committee that may get slipped in later if that's even possible. So we may get one more. But we're talking about a deadline of getting the warrant written and to the printer by March 22nd. So everything backs up from March 22nd. So we have from tonight to March 22nd to interview all of the department budget heads in town, discuss the budgets that are presented to us, agree on a contingent and non-contingent number, put those numbers together, then whittle down the non-contingent number if we're above, which we most certainly will be, what our revenues are, and also to interview everybody that's associated with those articles that were approved last night, and there are a lot of them. So we're going to have a busy time. This is a result of having not had the fall town meeting that we're going to have this crunch now. So please stick with me here. Once the warrant goes to the printer, we'll have a little bit of time to make some final changes, but that's not wholesale changes and doing big blocks of print in there or whatever. It's catching typos. And then the printer will print and mail it out, and then the annual town election will be on April 25th, and the town meeting will take place starting on May 1st. Last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting, Katie Conlon mentioned that she thinks this could be a 2-week town meeting because we have so many articles. Hi, Lucinda, how are you?
Sorry, I'm late.
You're okay. Why don't you run upstairs to the town clerk's office, and she can swear you in quickly, and then you can vote on things tonight, okay?
Oh.
She's going to be there for like the next hour, and then you can join us. Thank you so much. So then, town meeting is usually Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I believe, right? Okay, so it'll be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday the first week, and then probably Monday, maybe Tuesday of the second week, if everything goes wrong, Wednesday as well. And it'll continue in a pattern like that until we have agreement at town meeting. But we were amazingly fast at the last one. I think that went really well. We will probably have 2 budgets this time around, so it can't be amazingly fast, but we'll be as efficient as we possibly can. Any questions on the schedule? just scared. I'm going to run down these potential warrant articles very quickly and let you know kind of what they mean. So we have Massachusetts General Laws 3359, which is paid military or pay during military leave of absence. Chapter 13 of the General Bylaws, which would allow us to amend work hours as they're stipulated in the bylaw. Authorizing Consolidated Facilities Department revolving account, which would allow us to take solar credits, put them into a revolving account, and then use them for energy conservation measures. Sounds interesting. The Capital Improvement Planning Committee has put in a request to increase the dollar amount for line items that are considered by that committee, and then also to move out the time frame for which those projects would be complete. The Town Government Study Committee wants us to consider a chief procurement officer, which many of us got a preview of last year. The citizens have submitted a petition again for funding the playground planners. The Board of Selectmen have submitted a fundamental speed limit change so that they could institute a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit in thickly settled or business districts. Also, there is an article in here to accept an easement from the Milton Landing Condominium Association, which could be used for various things. The Planning Board has submitted a planned unit development zoning to cover great estates, which you may recall would allow them to write zoning that would preserve large mansions on big tracts of land where you could put in a planned unit development on part of that land, then there would be some open space and you'd be able to renovate the mansion. It's encouraging landowners to keep the big house on the property that has historic value rather than tearing it down and just using the space to maximize the number of units that they can put on the property. There is a request here from the Board of Selectmen to increase the tax on alcohol sales, and then also a request to allow alcoholic beverages to be sold at 2 Adams Street, which is a vacant lot that doesn't even look like it is buildable, but it is, in front of the extra space storage in Milton Landing area. Everybody know where that is? There is a request from the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board to do a master plan appropriation, which I can't imagine we could do under a non-contingent budget, but perhaps we could do something with on the contingent budget. I suppose there is free cash to talk about, but we'll hear more on that from the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. And then there's another planned unit development zoning submission for the Parkway, which is referred to as the Ice House property usually. Town Government Study Committee submitted a second one because they didn't think we were busy enough for changes to duties and responsibilities for the personnel bylaw. Nothing against the Town Government Study Committee. I think they're amazing. The Board of Selectmen submitted a special purpose stabilization fund to help more smoothly fund roadway improvements, which I think came about partly from all the work that we did last year to try to get some money put aside for that. There's been obviously many people who have been requesting that over time, so that'll be interesting to talk about. Planning Board submitted a temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana, and the Board of Selectmen submitted a request to reconstitute the Traffic Commission. Plus maybe fire needs study. Any questions on those?
Is there a possibility that any of them will be pushed forward to the fall?
Well, we were hoping that some of these would fall off the list that we got a preview of a couple of weeks ago that I sent out to you, and I'm shocked to see that the list is just as long as it was before. So I don't know of any that are on the fence. I think all the Planning Board ones are going to happen, and those are the meatiest ones, and the rest of them are from the Board of Selectmen, and they would know if they were going to do it or not. So I think that this list is going to stick. Sorry. All right. Let me just quickly ask about subcommittee work. I've seen some emails flying around. I try not to get involved in them too much because this is one thing that the chair gets to take off their plate, but if you need any assistance with anything, you can just let me know. So I just mostly file those away. But I know that some of you are scheduling time with your department heads and pulling your committees together. Is there anybody who is encountering any difficulties or needs any direction or has any questions or comments?
Well, I can say that I sent out an email on Saturday, but I'm not sure it went through. We're having a little technical difficulty, but if anybody who has had a chance to review the school budget wants to forward me any questions that I can then forward to Glenn Pavlicek and Mary Gormley, that's usually what we try to do with the school budget, and then I will send them the answers and the responses back to the full committee. And then I plan to have a subcommittee meeting with the school administration, early February is what I'm thinking, so.
Okay, great. And then we'll invite the school committee back for another round. Because that budget is so large, we have them in twice. Most other departments, though, it's important that the subcommittee review the budget in advance, talk to the department director with any questions that they have to help prep that person for coming in, because they're usually going to be in here just once. Any other questions or comments or concerns about subcommittee work?
In that regard, do you want to switch DPW around? Because we just got that budget today.
Are they on for next Wednesday?
They are.
What else is on next Wednesday? Do you recall off the top of your head?
Hold on.
Julia, did you ask them about the temperature? Did you ask them to turn down the heat in the room? Oh, you did. Oh, I thought you had to call facilities or something.
Consolidated Facilities, Council on Aging, and DPW.
Okay. Why don't you and I catch up tomorrow?
Okay.
And let me glance at it and see if there's major changes. If there's major changes and you think there's major changes, then maybe we have to push it off. But if there aren't a lot of increases, then
It's just going to be tough to schedule a subcommittee meeting before that.
yeah, that's a problem. Okay, we can move it out if we need to. If you want to move it out,
I'll
we'll
talk to
move it
them.
out. All right. Okay. Anybody else? You had something? I thought I heard
Our
something.
subcommittee met
Okay.
this morning, and I plan to write something up and send it out to the subcommittee first to make sure that I got it straight, what was said, and then I'll share it with everybody else.
Great. Okay. All right. Well then, Board of Health. Caroline, you want to join us? Anybody else coming up with you?
Thank you. Amy's going to come up, and I also have the board here supporting me.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Everybody, this is Caroline Kinsella, who's the health director, and then also Amy is back, Amy Dexter, who's our town accountant, and you helped to prepare the budget, right?
Yes.
Great. Thanks so much. Why don't we pass it over to you?
Can I hand out some canvas?
Of course.
This way?
Everybody has a copy of your narrative and the budget that was submitted.
Would you like me to go over the budget narrative first, and then?
That sounds great.
Okay, so at the beginning of FY17, the Health Department underwent some personal changes which resulted in wage overages. The Personnel Board approved one full-time health agent to replace our 2 part-time employees. Combining these 2 part-time positions resulted in a 10-hour personnel loss for the department. The Personnel Board and also the new town administrator approved a 16-hour part-time public health nurse, and that's what I'm asking for the health department. The non-contingent budget would support a nurse for almost 12 hours, and the contingent budget reflects a 16-hour part-time nurse. The additional amount needed in FY 2018 to fund a 16-hour nurse is $5,902. But the public health nurse is really essential to assist and state mandated health duties and responsibilities.
So the non-contingent budget as submitted could replace the 10 hours you lost plus add 2? Is that what you're saying? The non-contingent budget,
Yes.
right? And then the contingent budget, you're hoping to add another 4 on top of that?
Yes.
Okay.
So I handed out what we do and why we do it. I just wanted to go over some of the changes that's happened in the last 2 years and how the workload has increased in the Board of Health. And it really is an exciting time at the Board of Health because, first off, we started within the last 2 years, the Milton Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, which has over 300 members right now. We have our website, www.miltoncoalition.org. And we've been working really hard to gather all the data to find out what the problems are in Milton, and doing both quantitative and qualitative analysis, meeting with different departments and different people to gather information about what the data is showing in Milton and what the problems are. Met with the police chief and the schools. We have really built up the coalition. We have 12 sectors, and we have meetings every 6 to 8 weeks, and had so much movement forward in our coalition over the last 2 years. We have all our data on the website, and what our next plan is to go for a drug-free community grant, which is very exciting. The drug-free community grant will be a grant for over $1 million, which was approved by the town administrator, and we're in the process of applying for that grant, and Laurie Stillman will write that grant. So that's very exciting, and, it's a very competitive grant, but we're hoping to get it, and we'll find out. It's supposed to be, by March 15th, we're supposed to get that all together and submit it. But it's a long process, and it's taking a lot of time to do that, to get all the information we need to submit that grant. Another thing that has happened in the last 2 years.
Good luck with the grant, by the way.
Thank you.
It's worthy time spent, but thank you.
Yes. Well, it's a public health crisis, the substance abuse, so we really need to respond at the Board of Health. I also have another regional collaborative with Quincy, Braintree, and Weymouth that Milton is in, and we're also meeting monthly. So this is something new that we're doing, to gather information, different towns share best practices, and so we're moving forward with that, and that we meet every month for that. So that's something new that's happened within the last 2 years. Something else that's new is Seasons Hospice opened last year, and that has doubled our burial permits that we have to process. In 2014, 2015, we had 215 permits, and in 2015-16, 425. So that's increased our workload at the Board of Health. Another thing that's going on is complex housing cases. Even a couple years ago, I never even heard of what hoarding was, but we have been working for the past 18 months with a severe hoarder, and that's taken up an extremely a lot of time at the Board of Health to work to get that property into compliance. So that's taking up a lot of time and energy. Also working with the Milton Residents Fund with different cases. There was another trash case where I had to work with Diane Ferrari to get a dumpster delivered, and work to get trash stickers and buy some new barrels, because there was complaints from the neighbors about rodents, and it was a lot of work to do that, but we solved that case, and hopefully going forward, that will solve that problem at that area. And I talked about the state mandates. This is a new state mandate. So the vaccinations that I give at the flu clinics, which I gave probably over 800, probably 900 vaccines, we have to put that in a new system. It's called the Massachusetts Immunization Information System, MIIS. So this is data that has to be submitted in to the state, and this is something new that the Board of Health has to do every year. And that's going to take a lot of work. I haven't done it yet this year because I haven't had the time to do it, but that's another workload that we have to do. The number of communicable diseases has increased from 146 to 162. There's always some new disease that's around the corner. The human granulocytic anaplasmosis is something new that, it's a tick-borne disease that we're following at the Board of Health. So there's always something coming up that is new that we have to follow at the Board of Health on the communicable disease. And I talked about the rodent complaints. In 2014 to 2015, we had 11 complaints, and 2015 to 2016, 52 complaints of rodents. And what I had to do is contact Heritage Pest Control and went down to the square, looking on the deck for rodents, and working with DPW to replace the barrels and make them like steel, so the rodents wouldn't get into the barrels. But also going through the square, there was different complaints in that area. So went to all the food establishments, looked at all the dumpsters, then had all the food establishments send reports every month to us about pest control and what they were seeing in their establishments. And come to find out, there was no smoking gun. We're still getting reports every month. We weren't seeing any rats. We weren't seeing what people were reporting. So that's a good thing. All the food establishments do have pest control, and we weren't seeing the rats that we were getting complaints about. So that was really good.
I just have a quick question on the number of the rodent complaints, the large increase. Is that due to the fact that you weren't doing the monthly pest control, because you stated that you used to have it in the past, and now the town took it out of your budget, but now you have it again, correct?
I'm trying to understand your question.
Well, you had
Sorry.
said that you worked with Heritage Pest Control for East Milton and also for Waldeck Road.
Yes.
And apparently, you did in the past have some funding for Heritage to go out and take care of these two sites where you had a lot of rodents. And I'm just trying to see if you think this is probably a cause by not doing the pest control every month.
So the pest
For the
control has always
increase.
been, the pest control has always been at all the food establishments.
No, these are the vacant properties. The town owns like probably hundreds of vacant properties without buildings on them, I'm assuming. And so my question is, you used to have pest management, and you specifically, I believe, said that it was on
I think
Waldeck
Maggie's
Road.
referring to
Yeah.
an email, you know what
Yes.
she's
Yeah.
referring to.
So it
And
was
so I'm
before.
just confused as far as what type of management is the town now taking on these vacant properties, if any? Because I think that's very important.
So, in the past, before my time, there was some pest management with Heritage Pest Control. I think it was at Pierce Middle School. And this was years ago, maybe when they were redoing the school. And there was a problem in that area. So when there's a problem in the area, it will come to my attention. At Zero Waldeck, there was a problem at that area. So I went out with Heritage Pest Control. We surveyed the area. We identified where the rodents may be coming from. And it really is up to the property owner to take care of the rats. And I think that when I did go with Heritage Pest Control, I did identify more than one house that had the problem and brought it to the owner's attention. And then they were able to contact their own, that's what they're supposed to do,
Right.
contact their own pest controller, and did address the problem.
I guess my question is more, the town has lots of vacant properties without buildings. What are we doing to maintain so these rodents don't go on citizens' private property, that they're gonna become their issue? I think we have to be proactive in managing our own, too.
Yeah, I think that DPW is managing any vacant lots. And
They are?
yeah,
Yes, I didn't know
DPW
that.
did work with me too, to clear that area around the brook.
So there's
Yes.
some type of system in place that
Yes,
they go out every
yes.
month and do all of these vacant properties?
Well, DPW should be doing that. They should be cleaning the area. Yeah, and they did come out to Zero Waldeck and did some more cleaning at that site.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So, hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
So as you can see, there's a lot more responsibilities now at the Board of Health, a lot more time that we're spending, and that's why I'm asking for a 16-hour nurse going forward. As I said, the public health crisis is the substance abuse, and we've worked really hard at the Board of Health to create the coalition going forward, trying to apply for this grant, and I'm asking that we can get a 16-hour nurse, because it's really needed, really Yes.
Would you mind refreshing our memories again about the combination of the two positions and how that resulted in a 10-hour loss?
Yep. So Nellie was the health inspector. She worked 25 hours, and she retired after 17 years. Stephen Bell was the health agent. He worked 22.5 hours. We combined those two positions to make one full-time health agent, because we thought it would be better to attract one full-time person instead of two part-time. But in doing that combining, we've lost 10 hours doing that. So to combine both of those positions, losing 10 hours.
So what does that do to your workload management?
Yeah, so,
Because there's nothing in the contingent budget to address that, which seems, maybe not the best way to go, because it's gonna be a long time before there'd be another override to add any additional positions, and you're describing a lot more work. Because the 60-hour nurse is just a 12-hour nurse bumping up to 16. It's not a brand-new hire, right?
well, we don't have that in position
Don't
right
have
now.
it-
Yeah.
It's vacant, or,
It's vacant. Yep,
Okay.
it's vacant,
but it's vacant at 12?
yes.
So Mike, and is the vacant at 12 equal to the 10 hours money-wise? Is that's why that's that's what I was trying to get at the non-contingent?
So, do you want me to handle that? That's
Yeah.
kind of why I'm here.
Okay.
I'm not sure, did you share that spreadsheet that I did?
No.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we
We-
had that.
I
Yeah,
have
they
it.
got
We all-
Yeah,
we all
okay.
have it.
Okay, yeah.
So there's this, the reason why I'm here is I helped Caroline try to figure out what her salary and wage line would be level with FY17. So what we did was we took the total appropriation for FY17.
Amy, are you going to refer to the Schedule D non-contingent?
Salary roll forward to-
I just want to help
I think
everybody.
you're talking on
There's this, did everybody get this?
Oh, okay.
Might be the
Tab
last
salary
tab.
roll
Yep.
forward.
Okay.
There's kind of an addendum.
Salary roll forward.
Yes, that one. So the first 4 columns on that just show you how the appropriation for 17 comes from the warrant. It's a roll forward. I do different articles make up the total appropriation. But basically, because of the reorg, we wanted to make sure that the Board of Health was whole, and wasn't leaving something that they need, funding that they need on the table. So basically, I took the FY17 appropriation for salary and wage of 187,913. I backed out the sick leave buyback and the stipend that was related to the health inspector that retired. And then I added back in the steps for the employees that are currently in the department, which are Caroline and Erin and Jean. And that's how I came up to the 185,700. So when, if you look on Schedule D, the non-contingent, if you compare the contingent and non-contingent, the first 3 lines are exactly the same, right? Caroline, Erin, and Jean's salary and longevity totals are the same. And then I plugged the public health nurse to come to the total of 185,700, and then we backed into how many hours a week that would be at the hourly rate that that person would be hired at.
Okay.
Not sure if you're following me. So basically, I said to Caroline that I felt a level dollar salary and wage budget for the Department of Health would be 185,700.
Okay.
And to slot in that public health nurse for as many hours as she could afford to fit into that model.
amount.
And that's where the 17,119 comes. And 11.9 hours, I don't think anybody's going to work 11.9 hours, but that's what it comes to per week. And then what she did on the contingent was, that position is approved by the Personnel Board at 16 hours a week.
Yep.
So we just did the simple math. What is 16 hours a week for that position? So the differential is 5,902 to fund that position at the 16 hours versus the 12, or the 11.9.
Okay. Let me just do a quick
Yep.
timeout for the new warrant committee members. So each budget has, 4 to 5 different pages. And this year we have an extra page because we have a contingent and non-contingent for some scenarios. But the first page, the Schedule A, will show you an overview of the whole budget, which I'll throw up on the screen. So it will show salary and wages, general expenses. Those are the 2 lines that tend to be the biggest. And then any contracts the department has, new equipment, et cetera, and then any one-time items. This tab is a roll-up of the tabs that follow after it. So Schedule B and C, sorry, they all come in so small. Schedule B and C is other available funds and other fund balances. This is going to be important for departments that have a revolving fund or sources of income, et cetera. And then Schedule D, here we have 2 of them. That's the contingent and non-contingent salary and wage details. So this is where you can see the human resources that the department has. And then Schedule E is always the general expenses. And those last 2 are the ones that typically require the most study. Just wanted to make sure everybody was tracking with us as we bounced back and forth between all of the spreadsheets. So Caroline, Steve asked you a question earlier that I'd like to go back to, which is you already had this position approved. Your workload is increased. The position wasn't filled. Would filling the position at 16 hours under a contingent budget resolve the problems that you described in terms of workload?
It would help, absolutely. Would it resolve it? I think that the Board of Health is evolving. There's always new challenges. And I definitely think that it would definitely fill that, that void where we have so much work going into the substance abuse and different things that are coming up, the hoarding. So yes, absolutely, it would help. I don't know if it would,
I think he's asking you if it should be more.
oh, yes, it should.
Right?
I'm trying to,
Is that what
so I'm
you-
trying to say, yes, yes, it would
Even though
help,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
approved at more, that's what they're getting
Yes,
at.
yes, yes.
It doesn't seem like
Since this is a
enough.
contingent budget, we want you to,
Right.
We want you to tell us what
Yeah.
you need for a well-functioning
Yeah.
department and to deliver that message to
So
Mr.
if,
Dennehy as well.
if I could just say one thing, is I believe Caroline put it in at 16 because that's all that the Personnel Board approved it for, and historically, that's, if there's a position in your contingent budget that has not been approved by the Personnel Board, you cannot fill it. So I think she was trying to stay within the constraints of what the Personnel Board was. I suppose you could try to go back to the Personnel Board because you have a lot more information now.
Yeah.
A lot of things going on now that probably weren't happening in the Board of Health back then.
Yeah.
But I think that's the point. But that's why she put it in 16, because that's what she's instructed to do during the budget meetings that we have.
And Amy made the comment that she doesn't know who's possibly going to work for X number of hours under your non-contingent.
Well, I meant 11.9.
11.9.
You're going to probably do,
But could you get 11, you think?
no, I just mean nobody's actually going to work 11.9 hours per week as opposed to 10 or 12.
But is that partial position fillable under
You think
a
you could find
non-contingent
somebody?
scenario? Yeah, okay. Steve?
I was just gonna say, let's put some common sense on this one for $5,000 and pull it out of the non-contingent and just have it as 16. It doesn't, it doesn't make sense to me for that small of a thing for them to possibly go under-equipped to deal with all the things that they've got to deal with.
yeah,
Makes sense.
I agree with you, Steve.
yeah, absolutely.
One quick question, this nurse position, would there be limitations as to some of these additional constraints you're having that they would not be able to work, or, can they process the burial requests? Can they do the attend to the hoarding situation? And
So, go ahead.
I just wanted to also bring your attention about, there's 14 other Board of Health comparisons And we have the smallest department, 2.5 full-time equivalents compared to 14 towns around us. So we are really tiny compared to, when I go to other towns and meet with them and meet with the nurses, the directors, they just can't believe how small our Board of Health is. I feel like the Board of Health is more reactive than proactive because there's so many things going on. I feel like I'm putting out fires all day long trying to get things done. And I'd like to be more proactive, you know, educationally and give back and work more with the public, but I feel like that we just really can't do that because we're so small of a department, and that's a problem.
So to Steve's point, it's $5,902 for salary, and then there'd be an impact on benefits, right?
Probably not, because they wouldn't be insurance eligible or retirement eligible. That, you know, you have to work 20 hours a week
Okay.
to be eligible for the health insurance.
Did you make a motion?
But can I?
Yeah.
I don't
Sort it
want to
out
be out of
later,
order
just-
like I have been.
We don't have to,
I'd just like to know where people stand. We can have a discussion about it instead. Why don't you,
So-
what was the comment you were
All
going
right,
to
so
say?
I'm fully in support of the Board of Health, and I'm
Yep.
fully in support of what you're talking about, but now I have to put my town accountant hat on.
Yep,
The instructions given to all departments are non-contingent
right.
is your staffing plus steps and lanes. And we, as you will hear when
Every other
Mr.
depart- every
Dennehy
other
comes
department
later,
in, yeah.
we're looking at potential layoffs on the town and school side. So I just caution you to keep that in mind.
I think, sorry, I just wanted to comment that I got some feedback last year from the Warrant Committee that we waited too long after the department budget presentations to take the temperature on where the group was as to the specific budget that was in front of us, and that it may have been better to have weighed in on each department budget as they came forward. And then when you get to the end of the cycle and you're adding them all up, then you know what your delta is, where you have to cut. Then you go back to the decisions that you made and you start cutting back from there. And I was told that was actually how the Warrant Committee did it in the past before I joined.
So I guess, so to clarify, that's just part of your process, but
right.
she's not going to go and change what was
No.
submitted. Okay,
No.
fair enough.
No.
I get it.
Michael?
My question goes to what is a level service? I don't know what the numbers are for the number of individuals or substance abusers in the town. That'd be a great number to know. I know the police chief of Yarmouth happened to tell me at a Rotary meeting that it was 625 in their town. So that might be a thing you could say, we owe this to people who are substance abusers, and if there are more of them, then it's just gonna take more resources. If you can prove that you've got twice as many burial permits to do, the level services, you get a burial permit when you pass away. You can't not give that service because we only have, we don't have $5,000 for you.
If you want to make a comment, you can come up to the table. You just have to speak into a microphone.
Yeah, I'm Ann Fiddler on the Board of Health. I'd just like to comment where we do have a lot, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, we do have a lot of people who are experiencing substance use disorder. But a lot of the work that that we are responsible for is keeping that number as low as possible. It's preventing those people. That's where the work is. It's not providing services or providing, for the people who have the disorder. It's to get that number lower. And Caroline spends a lot of her time working with the schools, working with other people to try to educate, to do institute programming. Those are the issues as well.
Okay, so it's not as simple as there's more people being buried.
It's not, exactly. You're not just counting the number of people who have it.
I was trying to help you out that way. Making it complicated, but okay.
Well, I am making it complicated because
We're after the truth.
the real work is, underlying it all, so,
Okay.
anyway.
Thank you.
Steve?
question on the burial permits, is that a permit for fee? And if it is, does any of that fee roll back to the Board of Health, or does it just go?
Goes into the general fund, yeah.
That's too bad,
I know.
especially with them going up. Maybe you need a revolving fund.
So then I'll bounce to my next question, was you have a revolving account in your budget here. And if you could just explain what the purpose is of that.
Yeah.
It's line 2650, and you've got 38,000 balance.
So that revolving fund is for the flu clinics. So I buy vaccine for the flu clinics. In the past, the state had given the vaccine to me, and they cut back about 2 years ago to 50% that they gave to me, and then they cut back to only giving to the children. So over the years, we've increased how much we're paying for vaccine, so I purchased $12,000 of vaccine from Sanofi. We run in 9 clinics this year at all the senior housing housing complexes, and in the schools. We were also in the schools. And I haven't got all the numbers in yet, but probably about over 900 vaccines that we gave. So as you know, CVS can charge for the vaccine, and that's just come about recently in the past probably 3 or 4 years, that they can do that, making it like a money-making business. And now we can do that too. So we have our flu clinics, and we ask that people bring in their insurance information, and then we're able to charge for the flu shot. And so that's why we're getting money in through for our revenue stream for the flu vaccines. And then we purchase needles and supplies for that, and it helps run that fund.
Richard, did you have another question?
My question was just on this, this paper.
Yes.
I can't project this one.
No, it's right, it's the, Milton,
all have it.
the FTE comparisons. So the towns are very different size. I mean, and I guess Michael's question would have helped me figure this out too. Which ones of these towns would we match up with? Because some of these have lots of commercial businesses, some don't. Do we even look at that? Like, how do you, like, which of these towns would we, I mean, because obviously Brookline, I mean, Milton and Brookline are very different towns.
Yeah, I'd say probably Canton, right next door,
Okay.
Braintree.
Do you think population is the best
It's
indicator? What do you think?
You know what, every town has different, as you said, commercial
Because some of
base
those,
or
like
different
Canton has a
things,
lot more
yes.
businesses
Yeah, you're right.
than we do.
Yep, yep,
But does that matter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
it does.
Okay.
Yep, it can,
Okay.
yep, yep.
So is this funded, is this filled positions that we're looking at on the sheet?
Yes,
Yeah, so if you were to fill this part-time position, it would go to more like 3,
yes.
right? Okay. Anybody else have questions? Yeah.
What did you just say?
At the bottom of the sheet that the folks at home can't
Oh, I
see,
see. Oh,
Milton is showing as having 2.5 FTEs versus towns of a similar size that have 4 or 5.
So
And
that
I
would
was
go
just
to 3.
wondering if we were able to fill all the positions we have, how much closer to those towns we would be. We would still be at 3 below those towns.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are we voting?
Yeah, my preference would be to vote on each budget as they come up, and then we'll find out at the end of that process how over or under we are. We're going to be way over. And then we'll have to cut back from there and vote again.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the budgets as presented.
Okay? Any second discussion about that? This means that we won't do what Steve suggested, which was increase the non-contingent position. All those in...
So I like that when Steve said that.
Yeah, I do too.
But then Amy said we couldn't do that.
You can do that, but, I don't know what Davy's about, but,
That's not what Amy said.
yeah.
I was just questioning. It's a different process.
Right.
As long as we're not changing those sheets.
What we would
I understand
essentially be
what you're
doing
doing.
is approving their non-contingent budget tonight,
Yeah.
rather than
I
just,
like
Yeah.
that
I
idea.
mean, excuse me, their contingent budget, rather than just their non-contingent.
And
Most of the others are gonna just get a non-contingent.
what it means in the short term is that when I start putting together the spreadsheet for us to start looking at, the Board of Health's number would be $5,900 higher under the non-contingent scenario. So they technically would be getting more than the town administrator told all the other departments to to set themselves in at on a non-contingent. But we may make this choice to change others along the way as well.
Well, thank you, because I've just changed, not voting yes on this one, I'm going to vote no.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve as is? 5. All those opposed? More than 5. Okay. Lucinda, did you? Did you swear in upstairs?
I did.
Okay, great.
Just a
Yep.
comment, because it sounds like we're going in the other direction maybe now.
Yep.
And I know, Amy, that's not what you were intending, but I actually agree with the comments. I mean, we're gonna hear very similar stories with everybody coming in, and everybody, it's going to sound like just a few $1,000s or very short money to get there. But at the end of it, we're gonna have chosen a few because of the story when what I thought we were gonna be doing is setting everybody up even and then making a determination at the end. And what it seems like we're about to do is pick and choose a few people.
Sort of like faded to
And I don't think it's right.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'd say we have a lot of energy right now, but it's early, so I would,
Just from a straight organizational standpoint, I have concerns about injecting subjectivity into each individual
Yeah.
meeting that we
Agreed.
have here. When we get to the end and we have a consolidated view, we're going to say, oh, well, we actually moved money from their contingent into the non-contingent on this one. I think it would be helpful to work from single source of truth where we have contingent, non-contingent, we're
Agreed.
able to evaluate, so I
I mean,
agree
because
with
going back to the last few years, I mean, we've done this each and every year. We've seen a lot, every department is cut back, and every department needs people.
That's true. Jean?
Yeah, when we get through with all of the budgets, and then we seem to look at totals. And these little incidentals, which are not so incidental, get lost. You don't go back and review them, and you forget the story. And so that's the good thing about looking at each individual budget, spending time on it, understanding the issues at that point, because now we're going to see a multitude, and we're not going to go back and remember this. So that's why I think we need to.
But also, ironically, this will be Chuck's job to jockey for this budget when
Yeah.
we get to that point, because you're the subcommittee chair
Yes,
for
I
it,
am.
right?
It is, and the problem becomes, though, is it matters in which number you are coming in front of us, because
Yeah.
the first few are gonna get lucky enough to get voted in right away, and all of a sudden, we're gonna get worried, hey, we voted too many, and now we don't have enough money left, so it's a little unfair.
Or you have to take it
I
away.
don't, wait a second. Am I recognized?
I saw Steve first, and then I'll come to
Yeah.
you.
So that's all right. But, you know, my thinking on this is that it is not a big amount, and that there's going to be a lot of problems or issues that the different departments come in front of us with, a few of which I see in the paper every other week, as much as the problem with the narcotics. So, to me, it's a no-brainer, and when we go through the whole iteration, we're gonna wind up back at here, as opposed to just putting it to bed now. But, you know, that's just one opinion.
Yeah, that's how I
And-
feel.
Hold on, Jonathan. Go ahead, Michael.
I don't think we just heard a story and just randomly picked $5,900 to add. We heard some facts that said that there's more workload in this department. We saw a sheet of full-time equivalents of, we restore 4 more hours, and we're still below the lowest other town that was on this list. So, I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I think I can remember why we did this.
I can too, but I agree with it. I mean, I just don't think we should do it today.
Yeah,
Jonathan?
but what's the exercise? I mean, we've heard that these budgets aren't changing because they have their marching orders. Keep a running list of all these things that we want to revisit later. I mean,
We are going to have to, we will have to keep a running list, but the scenario that Amy described, the town administrator and the department's heads have a parallel track to the warrant committee. We want to inform each other along the way and learn from each other, but the warrant committee's responsibility is to be accountable to town meeting to recommend a balanced budget, and if we decide to recommend a contingent budget, to recommend a contingent budget that has, you know, the services that we deem necessary in it. The balanced budget has to meet our revenues. So we are going to make our own determinations aside from what town administrator and the department heads decide to do on these sheets. We are now free to start playing with the sheets.
which I agree with. I'm just suggesting that perhaps you take all the differences and you revisit the
Yep.
the differences.
Yeah, that is how we did it last year,
Yeah,
actually.
That's.
Did
But you're
somebody
getting-
over here
you're
before
getting
Jonathan? I saw Brian, and then I'll come to you, Jonathan.
So you got feedback
I just
that
think
didn't work.
I got feedback that it's not the way that the warrant committee functioned in the past, which was you take the temperature right when the person is here, and you take the vote and you ask the department head questions, and you're not 2 months away from having Caroline in and being able to say, you know, you capitalize on the passion as opposed to forgetting about the presentation. But yeah, Brian?
So just in response to Jean's point here, I think that's the role of our subcommittees here, too, is to not only communicate the numbers and what we've had in our side meetings, but to also steward the narrative that comes out there. So we certainly put out there, we have these budget narratives, and I think it's important that we socialize this as a group. But we talk about, we all feel very empowered right now because Caroline's here, we feel good about this, and I do feel like there's an element of subjectivity to it, and I feel like, why do we have subcommittees where we meet with these folks then? We should just have everyone socialize it here and see how we all feel and vote. But I think that's kind of what we charge the subcommittees to do, is to not only just communicate those numbers, but to be the stewards for that narrative, for that message. So in a lot of ways, I feel like if we start to pick and choose now, not only from down the road, kicking the can down the road from an organizational standpoint, but we're kind of undermining the subcommittee structure that we have here, which is we do split this up so that you can bring it back to the group and that you have that passion, you have that connection to the person. So that, but again,
I just want to observe that if we do what you're suggesting, we will only approve every non-contingent budget as it's presented to us.
Yeah.
We'll never make any changes to them if we follow what you just said.
what Chuck motion?
Yeah.
I thought it was.
Well, Chuck didn't argue that. Chuck said he wanted to approve this as is. He didn't say he doesn't ever want to make a change to a budget.
That's not what I'm saying either.
Okay.
In fact, I agree. I agree. It's not a lot of money. I'm in favor of it. I just think, from an organizational, from a subjectivity standpoint, I don't think it's a good practice. I don't think it's the right way to set the tone for a lot of these meetings that we're going to have here.
So we've.
I have Jonathan first.
Just a quick question, and with the discussion that we've been having in mind, do we have a sense of when we're going to have some revenue estimates?
Well, we have preliminary revenue estimates that the Board of Selectmen got last night, and we're going to hear from Mr. Dennehy later this evening that they are extremely preliminary. So in about 2 weeks, there is a conference, and the governor is expected to make some additional comments, and hopefully we'll be able to firm them up a little bit in about 2 weeks.
It's tough to make even small decisions, you know, $5,000 decisions, obviously. I think you get the sense we'd all love to shovel the money too. But as of yet, you know, we're operating, I wouldn't call it on rumor, but it's not much beyond that with respect to what the actual revenue situation is.
Steve, and then you.
So we voted it, and now we're debating it, and I'm just going to suggest that we move on to the next budget and just set this aside because we
still
didn't
have to vote on the budget. The budget wasn't. The motion was to approve the budgets as written, contingent and non-contingent, and we voted that down. So right now, there's no budget for the Board of Health, so we're going to have to vote again. So either.
That we.
Wait a second.
Yeah, I just have one
May.
quick question. Regarding your burial fees, being a new board member, how difficult is it to get some of the revenue from the general fund back into their revolving fund?
Impossible, but we could set up, not we, but there could be a revolving fund set up. Amy, do you know anything about why it is that those funds flow to the general fund as opposed to staying with the budget for the Board of Health?
Because everything goes to the general fund unless there's a specific reason why it wouldn't.
So there's no, but I mean, the parks, if the parks are selling a program, the revenue goes into a parks revolving fund, right? So if the Board of Health were, it's possible that a revolving fund could be set up to retain those fees in the department, but we don't know if that's a good idea or not, but it is possible,
It would
right?
be, I believe it would be possible, but it would not be possible for this May town meeting.
Agreed,
At a future
yeah.
town meeting,
Yep.
it would.
And we wouldn't do it, somebody else would submit an article to do that.
Just
Okay.
curious, what's the revenue that those burial fees generate?
So it's $10 for each burial permit. 10 times 400.
So 4,000.
That pays
Almost there.
There's your position.
I know.
All right, so I would like either a motion to go with Steve's suggestion earlier or a motion to approve as is or some other motion like that.
I was about to make a motion to add 5,000, the 4-hour position, which was the exact dollar amount that we want for the health.
5,902?
Thank you.
The-
$5,902.
So the motion, I think, most cleanly would be to increase the vacant public health nurse position to 16 hours in the non-contingent budget. Is that what you want to say?
That's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Is there any second for that?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? 8. All those opposed? 5? 6. The motion carries. Okay. So now just to be clean, can I have a motion to approve the budgets as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Michael. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstained? So unanimous then? Okay, I didn't see your hand, sorry.
Yeah, I was.
You're kind of like, so a unanimous to approve as amended.
Just going to block him out.
Thank you, Caroline, for
Thank
coming
you.
in, really appreciate it. And Amy, thanks for coming early and then staying and being here late. All right, well, that was an exciting first budget, everybody.
Makes everyone feel a long night.
Well, you know, one way that it's not going to be confusing is that last year I had lots of different scenarios, and I didn't have the temperature of the group on each line.
Yeah.
So I was having to present lots of scenarios to you and then make judgment calls like, should I keep this position in the budget to present you, or should I take the position out? And
But the only
We need to
thing,
make sure we're diligent
I just
and
don't
and
like that we
disciplined
ask.
around how we're tracking these.
what
you know,
changes?
every
we
year
make.
we always complain that people aren't giving us what a contingent is, what a non-contingent,
Yep.
what is a level, what's a level service for
sure.
$1. Like this year, they finally figured out what they're asking, and just changed it.
And now, yeah.
So now what people should be coming in with is a story of why we need to.
Cemetery.
So we're up to the cemetery now. Beth? Oh, there she is. Therese, thanks so much for coming. Come on up.
So nice to be here.
Is there anything else before that we move on with Therese? We're a little bit behind where I thought we'd be. So thanks so much for joining us. Everybody, this is Therese Desmond, and appreciate you coming in tonight. So I will hand it over to you. I will put your revised narrative up on the screen, and everybody has a copy of your budget as well. So if you want to start maybe with the narrative.
Okay, I have copies of the narrative as well, too, if you need a paper copy.
Great.
And I also brought a reserve fund transfer request, but I'll just
So
leave
much.
that with you. I don't think we have time for that tonight.
No, we're going to discuss it here
Tonight.
somewhere. You can either start with that or we'll move to that after.
Okay,
Do you want to start with that? And
Sure,
tell
we can-
everybody what that's all about?
I can do that. And I have a copy for everyone, and this is last year, just prior to, this is a request from our chairman of the Board of Trustees for $20,000, $20,056 to cover salaries for this year, and for the stormwater fee that's been assessed at $7,000 that we didn't anticipate. Just before town meeting last year, we had a fluctuation in our employees. We had quite a few retirements, promotions, and new hires. And so every time I revised my budget, it was based on the changes in our personnel staff. So just before town meeting, I asked Lee Michael if we could...
Minutes before town meeting.
Minutes, well, I know, but if we could change the appropriation request based on what we're actually going, now everyone is in place and nobody's moving around, and we need an additional $12,000 to cover our salaries this year. So I've done an Excel spreadsheet with everyone's salary this year and how much additional it will cost, minus what was already transferred in for the wage increases. And it comes to $12,000, plus the $7,000 for the stormwater fee. So that's what we're requesting from this reserve fund. And if it's just a placeholder, it can be that. We could see how the budget goes during the year and see if we can live without it. But
You
I
lost
just
Amy, right?
just get the request in.
My recollection was that we had kind of agreed, we didn't take a vote, but we had more or less a consensus that we could not make a change to your budget as presented to town meeting on such short notice, but that it made sense that because the nature of the position changed and the person filling it, that we probably would need to do a reserve fund transfer to increase your budget to meet what you needed for that $12,960. But I don't recall ever talking with you about the stormwater management fee, and all departments, I think, are being impacted by that. So I don't know why we would increase the cemetery budget for the stormwater fee unless we were to go and increase all town budgets, which I think would not be possible with the reserve fund that we have. So why did you request a reserve fund transfer for that amount of money?
Well, we just found out what the stormwater fee would be, so we didn't anticipate it being that much. So no, we didn't know before town meeting about the amount. We just found out last month.
Right.
And it's, because we have a lot of property, it's pretty high. I don't know if a lot of other departments are facing that shortfall as well. It is included in my 2018 budget.
Yep. Did you have a question? Thought I saw you raise your hand. Okay. What do other people think about that? Yeah, Lucinda?
I would expect the cemetery to have more of a charge for the wastewater because of what is supposed to be based on inflow into streams and stuff, things like that. And other budgets, I don't think they all have the same magnitude.
Parks?
Okay, they would, but I was thinking about some of the
A lot
other
of
ones.
roads. It's paved areas,
Right.
right? So,
The schools have huge roofs.
oh, no, I realize.
Yeah.
But I would presume that she's going to get hit harder than consolidated facilities or, I mean, even the fire department, they don't have large, or the police department, I don't think it would be a whole lot more than a small business
Right.
or even a large home.
Is your point more the precedent rather than the worthiness of it? Is that?
My point is we're going to have a problem this year that I don't think we anticipated until this reserve fund transfer request came in, where a bunch of budgets might be over because of the stormwater fee, because it's brand new this year and nobody budgeted it in when they submitted their budgets for last town meeting. Does anybody? I mean, we didn't know what the fees were, so nobody has that in there. Yeah. So I would suggest we take that off the table for now, and we're going to have to figure out what the total impact for the town is, and figure out how to deal with that, or encourage departments to absorb it somehow, knowing that we would have to make that recommendation sooner rather than later because time is going by for you. But Betty,
I was just going to ask Glenn, since he's here, if did the schools get a number from stormwater?
18,500.
so he said 18,500, and I'm assuming the schools are finding a way to do something with that rather than submitting a reserve fund transfer request. And since the library happens to be in the room, what's the plan for the library to submit a reserve fund transfer? No, you're going to do something to absorb it in your budget. Okay. So I don't think we can act on that right now. But why don't you submit two separate reserve fund transfer requests, if you like? One for the position, which we said we would take care of because we knew about that already, and then we'll act on that when we get it. And if you'd like to, either submit one for the stormwater or wait on it until we can talk with the folks in the town administration and figure out what we need to do about that and what the overall impact would be. So we need to look at the total fees for town departments.
Okay.
Okay?
Procedurally, could we split it right now?
I don't know. Technically, I have to sign this document, and it has both of the.
Thank you.
Right.
You can't cross out part of it.
I'd prefer to not cross it out, if you don't mind. So, can we put that aside for just now, and would you resubmit it separately, please? Thank you. Okay. So, do you want to jump into your narrative?
The narrative kind of concentrates on, what was expended last year to explain what you might have questions on, to kind of anticipate what you might wonder what different line items cover as far as expenses and which line items went over and which were less than anticipated. So all the line items are predicted and every year, things change, our priorities change, and our expenses are, you know, we try to forecast what they will be, but they do kind of ebb and flow depending on, you know, what happens during the year. So some of the line items, you know, were more expensive than others, and I've tried to explain why they were. There are a few things that we spent money on which were a development cost, because that's a priority of the department right now. If we find extra funds, we're trying to open a new section for development. And at this point, I can't take someone out and sell a grave there because they'll walk off and go to another cemetery. It just doesn't, you know, a burial space for your loved one, you want it to be, you know, beautiful, and it's not completed yet. So we have probably maybe 200 4 grave lots left for sale, but we're only selling for immediate need until we can get some more areas developed. And we have a request in for capital funding. I don't know what the status of that is. There is some additional funds requested in the non-contingent budget for professional services, and that was to cover engineering costs for some planning and development. If we were funded through capital, we wouldn't need that extra fund in that line item.
Did you submit it for a capital request?
Yes.
About how many lots would you sell in a normal year if you weren't constrained?
It ranged from 350, I think 250 to 350, depending.
So you have 200 now, and so you couldn't even satisfy requests in a normal year?
I have 400, it'd be 200, two
Oh, you
grave
have
lots,
400, okay.
And I know when we did put a moratorium on the sale of graves, and we gave a projected date of December 1st, 2015, we sold an awful lot of graves. I think we had, over the period of a month and a half, we brought in $500,000 in the sale of graves. So I think if we do reopen, we're going to have a lot of interest in purchasing graves, because, you know, if we close for immediate need again, then, you know, people are going to want to try to.
And you were doing some work on some land, so are you projecting that you'll be able to open graves soon? Grave sales soon on that new land that you were working?
Yes, there's 600 graves, landscape it and make it look a little better, so
And that can be done under your non-contingent budget, right?
that can be done, yes.
Okay.
And our contingent budget and non-contingent is, I think, is 3.9% increase. Non-contingent is level funded. Salaries are the same, and whether it's contingent or non-contingent. I'm not asking for any new employees, and the general expenses are the only thing that have increased. Yes.
Apologize if you already covered this. Can you explain the big jump in professional services year over year?
Last year?
Yeah. Or for what was appropriated, we were 4,900 appropriated and 11,000 in non-contingent, 15 in contingent. I know that's for surveyors and things like that. I'm just wondering what's driving that.
Oh, it was because it was almost $5,000 for the surveying and the layout of a new section. According to state law, every single grave needs to be numbered with something in the ground, a plaque in the ground. And so you have 600 graves, you need a surveyor to make sure that they're all laid out correctly. And then I think there was a workshop with Jonathan Appel for conserving monuments.
So, but that number's going back down, isn't it?
Well, the actual in fiscal 16 was 10,000, so the non-contingent's at 11,000. That's reasonable. I'm just wondering why the contingent would be up another 4,000.
Well, why would it? It was a one-time charge, really, to work on laying out that new property, right? Is that going to be an ongoing fee that you have to pay?
We have another section that we can get laid out as well. There's an open area right in front of the maintenance garage, and that would be an area where I'd have to get a surveyor to come in and number the graves.
So you're planning on using the money that is in that line for that purpose?
Yes.
Okay. Do other people have questions? Yeah, Steve?
On your income, Trace, the burial rights and the gift fund, are those available to use throughout the year, or does the gift fund, is that like a revolving fund that money stays in there?
The gift fund is donated money for beautification of the cemetery, and sometimes it's earmarked for a specific purpose,
Okay.
and other times it's just a donation for general beautification.
Okay, so the cemetery budget is in the neighborhood of, oh, I don't have to give it in the neighborhood, but request for 820,000, of which it looks like the burial rights is the income that's available, and then the rest comes off of town budget. So I guess my question is, how much money is sitting in the perpetual care fund, and is there income available from that to offset this? Say that you're a resident that thinks that a cemetery could be run more like a private business than a town department. That's a big chunk, 3/4 of the money coming out of the town revenues rather than out of cemetery revenues.
Okay, well, the budget form changed this year. I usually I would itemize our income as well.
Mhm.
I think our income, I don't have that with me tonight, but I think it was around 500,000 last year that we turned over to the general fund. So that goes directly into, and that's from the opening of graves and foundations, tents, installation of vaults, so that.
Could we get that from you?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, business-wise, the trustees are analyzing what other cemeteries charge and what the market will bear.
There, yep.
So we had a couple increases in our services this year, a couple of increases in prices.
Okay, so we can know what's in the perpetual care fund too, and the sort of annual income that's generating
Yes.
on itself. Okay, thank you.
Oh, yep, go ahead.
A quick question. When we met last year, the subcommittee met with you last year, you were discussing the possible acquisition of some adjoining land. Has that moved forward at all?
Would that be the one along Gun Hill Street, the Deer Run?
Yes.
Yes, that was acquired. The Copeland Family Foundation.
Oh, all right.
It's a grant to purchase that.
But that hasn't been developed as yet, I presume?
No, that's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tree work to do and fill, and so we haven't got there yet. We're trying to develop the easier sections that can be readily available. We don't have the funding to develop that yet.
And then there was property that might someday become available from Milton Academy. There was some talk about that.
That was, it's not going anywhere at this point.
Okay. Yeah, you had spoken of it as a long-term prospect.
Well, it would be desirable, but I guess it's desirable to the academy as well.
Okay.
So the changes to Teresa's budget are mostly on Schedule E. And I'm looking at the fuel oil line and just have a very small question. Why would you need more fuel and oil under a contingent versus a non-contingent budget? What would you do with that?
It's a good question. I think there's a different reason for that, but.
Don't think it's in the narrative.
Except for maybe the other equipment.
Yeah.
Buy more, buy more stuff.
Yeah, actual expense was almost 30,000 last year with all the oil expense, so that's,
So the non-contingent, maybe you backed into it?
yeah, I'm not sure, because the heat and fuel and oil sometimes get mixed up because it's the same company, and when it's accounting system, sometimes they, if you add in last year's expense, it was actually almost 30,000. And now I'm just asking for.
I'm wondering if there's an error, because what we appropriated last year was 23,950. And what you included on your contingent line is 23,950. But for your non-contingent, you reduced it to 21,000.
Maybe you flip them.
Well, I don't know why she would ask for less than she got last year. But
To make the
I am
numbers-
guessing that they're both supposed to be 23,950. What'd you say?
To make the numbers work, if you're stuck at the non-contingent.
I can't hear you, Steve.
If you're stuck at the non-contingent, you gotta reduce some expenses to get there.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think that's
Maybe
what
that was
happened?
during the period of time we were looking at solar panels.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Therese, should the 21,000 be 23,950 under non-contingent, or do you think it's
I would
correct
think
as it is?
so, but then we're over level funding. So I'd have to adjust that somewhere else.
So
I mean, if I
some-
make that 23, then I'll have to take that from a different line item.
So something else increased by that amount.
Yeah, something does, yes.
I'm wondering if we can eyeball it and try to see where the money went. Or it could have been professional services.
We could balance it out by taking it from professional services and adding it to fuel and oil line.
Do you see any reason why you would need less fuel oil this year than you needed last year?
No.
So under a non-contingent, you probably need that number where
Yes.
it was last year. Okay, so my suggestion would be then to decrease professional services by $2,950, and then put that number up into fuel and oil for non-contingent. Okay? All right. And then the other major places where there were changes, you addressed grounds and maintenance, equipment maintenance, other equipment in your narrative. Does anybody have any questions about these lines?
Just one on the water, because your narrative said that the water is going up, but your actual for 16 was less than you budgeted by $1,000 almost.
And then we got last summer's water bill, and it was really high. We had to water trees like every day because we have so many of them, and they're under stress. And the water bill is high, but it's a lot less expensive than
So
taking
the
down
actual is
trees.
missing some of the expense that rolled into this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it would have been in August of this year after the fiscal year ended. And the reason why we'd like some more money in tree work is because if you look at the number of trees we have, we could easily have a contractor come in for 2 weeks a year just to do some, proactive pruning rather than, reactive, which is all we can afford right now. And sometimes when you prune a tree and you see some hazards in a tree and take off some weight because the tree's declining, you can keep it in a healthy condition for a much longer period of time.
It's hard to approve a budget that has a request for a new golf cart in it, but tell me how important it is to have that.
I had one of those think machines that everybody drives around, little white mobiles, and I've been using it since 2002. And when it went down, I didn't have a vehicle to go out in the grounds, and I do things such as gardening and landscaping and
Sure.
and washing monuments, and I can't do that with my car.
Okay. Are there any other numbers on here under the contingent scenario that concerns anybody or that you have questions about?
That was a 3-year used golf cart.
Thank you. Steve?
One last question, because we've been, this committee has been supporting the consolidated facilities for the last few years, and I saw in there for equipment, repair and maintenance, and wondering if there's any new discussions about trying to join forces with what they're doing there and see if we can't find, efficiencies, economies of scale across town.
As far as I know, we have a lot of equipment, and the equipment maintenance person is busy all day long. And I don't know how their operation runs, but I think that they're more like building and maintenance rather than equipment repair. We help other departments out when they have questions on the smaller stuff that we use, such as Kubota tractors and backhoes.
So it seems like the overall impact's about $31,350 to the contingent budget if it's approved as amended. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments before we vote on this? I have a motion then? I can't have a motion.
I would move that we pass the cemetery budget.
As amended.
As amended.
Any seconds? Second. I heard Brian. Any discussion? Yes.
I would just like to see the revenue numbers before we did
For
anything.
the perpetual care?
Okay. So do you want to hold off on?
That I would like to, but if, that's not the will of the group, that's fine.
Tell me how it would inform your decision.
I just want to see where things are falling and what percentage of the budget is being covered by the cemetery and what's being covered by town side.
Okay. If you want to do that, you can vote no, and we'll vote on the cemetery again later since there's a motion on the
Sure.
table. Any other discussion? All those in favor? 9, 10, 11, 12? All those opposed? 1? Okay. Thank you so much
Thank you
for
very
coming
much.
and appreciate it. You guys want to come? Adam, I'm sorry we're a little bit behind. Everybody, this is Adam. William Adams. How do you say your last name,
Adam
William?
Zick.
Adam Zick.
I
This
get
is
Adam
William.
all the time, so don't
And
worry
who
about
was on the subcommittee for the library?
it. Gene and Mike.
Just Gene and Michael, okay.
They were.
And I was last year, so I do know your name, even though I screw up everybody's names all the time.
Don't worry about it.
And Frank was going to call in, but he ended up having really spotty cell service, so apologies that he couldn't make it. But thank you for coming in. I know you thought you were done with this job, but you're not.
Still a trustee. Actually, I have a few words to speak on behalf of
Oh,
Frank, if
please.
that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
He actually has a written statement that I'm going to read for him, so Frank is the chair, and he wasn't able to be with us. First, I apologize that due to my personal schedule that I can't be with you this evening. When asked to prepare a contingent budget, we took that to mean a budget that would deliver a satisfactory level of service relative to the current level of patron demand. That is the budget our director prepared and which the trustees fully support. It calls for an increase in headcount. We have been told you will be laughed at. We understand it is a big ask. However, our responsibility, our director's responsibility to the public and to you is to paint a picture of what we believe is needed to meet the current demand for library services. We are not going to self-censor ourselves. Rather, we will present a complete picture and work back from that as financial realities require. Thank you all so much for hearing us, your consideration of our requests, and your service to the town.
Frank, always such a rabble-rouser.
What's the best way for me to...
Do you have copies of the presentation?
I don't.
Okay, so everybody's going to look up here. You could just say next slide, and I'll hit
Okay.
next slide.
I will also say that the presentation is available on the library website under the trustees page, too. If anybody's online, they can look at it that way. But thank you for seeing us tonight, and thanks to Chris for joining me, and John Folcarelli's here in support of the library as well. And thanks to Gene and Mike for meeting with Frank and I last week to have our discussion with the subcommittee. That was helpful to get some of the questions done there, too. If we head to the first slide, I'm just going to try to talk a little bit about what library services are in the town of Milton, where we stand right now, what our challenges are that we are facing, what needs and demands we're not meeting, how we compare to some other towns and communities, and then how in our contingent budget we try to address the current needs of the library. As you can see from this picture, the library serves all aspects of our community. We see different faces every day. We see some faces every day, but we do try to touch every part of the community. If we go to the next slide, why is the library important to the people of Milton? Well, it's free to all, so free services ranging from traditional checking out books to checking out e-books, programs, story times, all those things. The typical life of a library user is, you come in, you're sitting in your parents' laps, not really knowing what you're doing. You grow up, you go to grade school, you start reading for yourself. You come into our teen room when you're in middle school in droves in the afternoon. High school, you start studying for midterms. You come back on college breaks. You disappear for a while, and then you come back as adults, either with your own family or as yourself. So we have a whole cycle going through the library from young to old. It's also important to know that the library is everywhere. We're open 24/7. We don't staff ourselves 24/7, but we have databases, ebooks, and services that are always available online on our website. We are available at places like Fuller Village, Home Inc. We go to the farmers market. We do story times at the pool in the summer. And most recently, we introduced little free libraries to many of the parks here in town. So we are available, trying to be available wherever you are. If we go to the next slide.
Will, how are the little free libraries doing?
So they're doing really well. As you know, there's a number of little free libraries going on in the town now. The library started them at the parks last year, and the schools have put them up at the schools as well. The Friends of the Library have been adopting them and restocking them when necessary. But the whole idea is you can go take a book, leave a book. You can just take one if you want, or leave a few, whatever suits you at the time. But we haven't had to restock them too much because people have taken on to them, and there's people who have become regulars of them. So it's kind of just a neat way to promote reading in the community. Yeah.
I noticed some paint them as well.
Yes.
Which is a fun activity. Yeah, that's fun. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So what does the library do? Some of the main things we offer to the town is early literacy. The library is where you go before you go to school. It's where you go to get ready to go to school between story times and different children's programs. It's a place for lifelong learning. So it's people who are trying to learn a new skill or just continue their education into adulthood and older adulthood. It's a place where we have resources for that. It's a community meeting place, from Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to soccer boards and softball boards. All kinds of groups, community groups meet in the library. It's also a meeting place for programming, concerts, speakers, movies, things like that. We still have traditional reference services. People will come and ask questions. When I started in libraries, people would call on the phone and ask who the MVP was in the National League in 1956. Google takes care of that now, so we have more in-depth questions and more research project questions that we have now compared to then. Critical technology services. You'd be surprised the number of people who come in and use the library as their primary internet resource, both for Wi-Fi but also for physical computers and printers in the library. There's quite a bit of job seeking and job searching done, as well as just basic email services on a fairly regular basis for some people at the library. In addition to that, we have technology services, digital services, e-books, and other streaming services at the library. And finally, we're an archive. We host the Milton Historical Society. We're an exhibit place. We have monthly exhibits in our gallery downstairs on the first floor, and we have historical exhibits on the second floor. So it's also a place to come and view things. If we go to the next slide, I just want to talk about a few key metrics. This is just looking at a 5-year comparison. Library services have changed. I was talking to somebody recently. I said, libraries, it's not your father's Oldsmobile type of thing. It's not just books. It's not you're just going in and checking out the new John Grisham or whoever. There's a lot more to it now. We've become a lot more digital. 10% of our overall circulation or better now on a monthly basis is ebooks or e-magazines, so on. We've become a community center offering programs for young and old. And so the library has really adopted these new roles in the town. And you can see where we've seen humongous growth in our ebooks, growth in the programs we offer, even a larger growth in program attendance, people coming through the door, that's our visits, and in our computer usage at the library. We were really fortunate to have a new building now about 8 years ago, and that That saw a lot more people coming into the library than ever before, but we've been able to continue to get people through the door on a regular basis, whether they're just in to check out a book, they're there with their kids, or they're there to see a movie. So the complexion is changing, and these metrics show some of the new usage of libraries. If you go to the next slide, this is just trying to aggregate some of those, some of that usage, where you take all the numbers. There's not a great individual metric for measuring all library services, but this is if you bundle every transaction, whether it's helping with a download, if it's somebody sitting at a program, and it just shows the 5-year difference in the growth aggregated out when they're all bundled together. On the next slide, I just talk briefly about recent improvements at the library. We've recently completed a turnaround in the library, which was a safety concern. It allows people to stay in our parking lot when they're looking for a space because we're so busy with whatever's going on that day. That was partially funded using state funds that we received for building it, and partially through trust funds. The addition of Hoopla, which is a brand new streaming service. It's a library version-ish of Netflix, where you can stream movies, TV shows, but also comic books, ebooks, etc. And then we revamped the teen room. The teen room has gotten more use than we ever expected, with 30, on average, about 30, 35 kids coming every day after school. With the help of the Milton Library Foundation, we were able to replace some of the furniture and upgrade some of the technology in there. So we are using a public-private partnership with our foundation to help with things that are outside the operational budget of the library. Next, on the next slide, I'll talk about current challenges. What's the library facing right now? We're trying to meet the demands of the people coming through the door. And we have a huge backlog of people looking to be trained with ebooks, other library workshops on technology. We can't fit enough people into our story times. There's wait lists for people to come to children's programs on a regular basis. We can't meet the full potential of our facilities. And what that means is we have rooms on the lower level of the library. There's a conference room and a meeting room, which are used quite often by groups, but there's times during the day that we might be able to use them as a tutoring space or something else, but we don't have the staffing to open that floor all the hours the library is open. We are not able to provide adequate teen services. We have a full-time teen librarian. Anybody who has or has had teens will know that you get a room full of 20 of them and they want to do 18 different things. So the teen librarian is able to meet some of the need for the teens and the tweens using our facilities, but we need more help in that area, particularly during the school year, after school when they come in. Some want to study, some want to be doing more interactive things, and we're trying to meet those demands. And finally, we can't meet the current demands for new books. Anytime we're trying to, but we have wait lists for new titles. That's nothing new. The wait times have gone down over the last couple of years, but there are still wait lists. And if we look at the next slide.
Can I ask you a question
Sure.
before we move on? I'm a fan of the library, but you don't want to have a service that is doesn't have any wait times associated with it, because then that means
Right.
you're overfunding it.
That's
What
right.
is your benchmark for telling whether or not you have a healthy amount of wait time or you're not serving the public adequately?
So there's no easy answer to that, but what we look at, and we can get live numbers, but we look a couple times a week, is it's a holds demand chart, so we can see how many holds are on each item at any given time. We try to have a benchmark between 3 and 5. So if there's 5 holds on a book, we won't order 5 copies, we'll order 2. It's healthy to have 3 to 5 holds on an item. Does that answer?
Almost, but there's programs which have wait times.
Okay, so I
and
thought we were
everything
talking about books. So with
everything that was on that slide in
Okay.
terms of like where you're saying you have a wait or whatever.
Right, with programs, right now with the children's programs, we have enough demand to offer second versions of several of the programs we have. We have counts of that. We wouldn't then add a third version of it because there isn't a demand for it right now. There's not solid numbers, it's more wait times as they come on a month-to-month basis for that. And technology, there's a chart for that too. That's harder to tell because there's unmet demand that we don't even know of. We don't know how many people come in, see a line, and don't even come to the desk for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So this is just, in a typical month, people will request 3,500 books. This isn't you just going in and checking out. This is going into our system, placing a hold on an item to be sent to the library for you. And in an average month, we're able to fill 2,700 of those, but there's 800 that are unmet demand for those. So there's room to get closer to close that deficit. On the next page, and again, I just, when I was answering Lee Michael, it's harder to know exactly what the unmet demand is for attendance. We have programs where we can clearly tell. We have had Downton Abbey Teas where there's a wait list of 25 people, and that's a specific program that we know about. With the story times, it's often the room fills up and we don't know exactly how many people want to get into the room and how many people are just visiting the room. So we do kind of mini censuses every once in a while for the children's programs that don't have a sign-up list. And that's where we got to the 150 number between the census on a monthly basis when we would do it and the wait lists that we have. We have an online system where you could register for children's programs, and we keep a wait list once we get across that threshold. And then finally, the hardest one to talk about is the unmet technology demands. We know approximately, if we go to the next one, we know how many people come to the desk and ask for help. We don't know how many people are struggling at home. We don't know how many people just quit after one try. If we're able to offer more classes, we think we'd be able to meet more of this technology demand. If we go to the next slide, we're getting there. This is a chart of libraries. I'm a librarian, so it's in alphabetical order. But this is after a couple of times coming to the Warrant Committee and taking some feedback. We originally used the libraries with the star next to them. These are libraries which, according to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, are within our cohort of comparable libraries. And these are the top 10% type of libraries. This is our goal. This is what we want to be. The ones with the G are more geographic locations, with the Canton and Randolph, our neighbors, and the Ps are just straight up population, libraries, similar libraries with a very close population. And again, so over time we've added in the geographic and the population numbers. And what I'm trying to show in this chart is, and it's going to go on to another page. We are average or above average of this list in all of our usage with our visits, our program attendance, our room use, our circulation, our holdings. It's when we get to the FTE, the per capita spending on libraries and our appropriation that we drop into the bottom half of this list. And I think just to take as an example, Canton, our neighbor, they have a higher they have a higher FTE, they have a higher per capita spending and a higher appropriation, but we outnumber them in all of the usage categories. So it shows that we're doing more with less than somebody right next door. And then also...
Yeah, Maggie has a question.
Regarding the FTEs, do you make any comparison with your part-time employees versus what the other towns have for part-time employees?
We do. I don't have that broken out in this chart. But this includes,
I'm just curious how we,
Yeah, how they
you know,
split.
whether we're more or less, how the
Right.
split is.
But the part-time employees are in that number.
They're in the FTE number.
So he's added them together to create
Yes.
full-time employee equivalents.
they're based on a 37.5-hour work week. Right? The other thing that chart, it doesn't quite show, but if you took, an average family of 4 over a year, and this is using an ALA standards, if you tell the story that maybe the grown-ups take out 6 books a year, the kids come in and take out 40, you take out a couple of ebooks, some DVDs, you go to 1 program, the kids go to 6 programs, you borrow 1 museum pass, and you ask 2 questions at the reference desk. That comes out to $927 worth of value. So your return on investment for the $42 for this average usage of the library is significant. If we go on again, just how we plan. We use a lot of statistics at the library, so we use historical data, we use strategic planning, we use the annual data surveys of the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. We have a current 5-year financial forecast that the trustees have been doing for several years, and we're in the first year of our library long-range plan. And it lists, early literacy, lifelong learning, stimulate imagination, connect to the online world, and visit a comfortable place. Those are the pillars of the strategic plan. I will introduce some factors affecting our budget. One is state aid requirements. The library has historically received about $32,000 to $36,000 in state aid from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. There are a number of factors, including hours open, that affect this, but the 2 that most directly affect the budget are called the municipal appropriation requirement. And basically what this does is it takes the average of the previous 3 years and you multiply it by 2.5%. And the library's budget has to meet that threshold in order to meet that part of the state aid requirement. That includes operational, it includes our operational budget and our revolving funds to meet that number. They're both included in that. The other number is the materials expenditure requirement. That's based on population, and with a population around 27,000 like Milton has, we need to spend 13% of our annual budget on materials. So I list the 2 numbers for the contingent and non-contingent to meet that threshold. And you can meet the materials budget with revolving fund and operational funds. And that's what we've been able to do the last several years. Another factor facing the library, and I've introduced this over the last couple of years here at the Warrant Committee, is our materials revolving fund. The fund has been going down in the last 4 years. In fiscal 13, we took in $65,000. Last year, we took in closer to $53,000. This is directly related to the emergence of ebooks and digital technology. If you check out an ebook, after 2 weeks it disappears off your device, so there are no fines associated with it. So I believe it's that, and not that people in Milton all of a sudden return their books on time. We still have that. So that number is decreasing, and our budget reflects that. The next slide talks about the non-contingent budget. Non-contingent budget does not meet our current demands. We will continue not to meet the training and technology assistance, wait lists and for story times, enough programming to meet current demands, school visits, off-site book discussions and technology trainings, and wait times for ebook and print circulation. It also does not support the library's long-range plan.
Will,
sure.
Your non-contingent budget request is an increase over appropriated last year.
That's right.
So what you're saying on this slide is that even with that increase, you're still not going to be able to do these things, right?
That's right.
Okay,
On
so
a non-contingent.
a little later on, I want to talk about what would happen if we put you back to what your appropriation was last year.
Sure.
And what additional you would be missing. Okay.
Great. The next slide. So our big ask is staffing. We have most what we need within the building. We don't need to add too much to general expenses. We need staffing. We have requested 5 additional staff, 3 full-time and 2 part-time staff. 3 of these positions have been approved by the Personnel Board. 2 of them are vacant. 2 of them were vacant last year, the reference librarian, the reference technology librarian. They would go towards meeting, well, the reference librarian would help meet the after-school demand, allow us to meet more adult programming needs and more outreach, especially to our senior population. The technology librarian would directly meet technology needs, offering more training to the staff as well as to the public, able to offer classes and one-on-one assistance. The part-time library assistant would also help with the after-school areas where they can monitor a room while a teen librarian is off doing a programming in another part of the library. The full-time library assistant, that would be somebody you would see at the front desk. Right now, if 1 or 2 people are out at the front desk, you might see me down there. We're very short-staffed, but in addition, we're not able to meet the demands of updating our new website, doing our promotional materials. Everybody has a second job within the library, and they're not able to meet it. So this library assistant would allow that to happen. And then the part-time children's librarian would go directly towards meeting the demands for children's programming. So the fiscal year 18 contingent budget supports the mission of the library, it supports the long-range plan, and it meets the current demands of Milton residents. And thank you for listening to our library story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to put up Will's spreadsheets.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Maggie?
Under your general expenses, Will.
Yes.
You have office supplies and then any supplies.
That's right.
2 different line items.
2 different line items,
Can you
yes.
just explain
Sure.
a little bit what that is?
So office supplies is traditionally what you would think of as office supplies. Any supplies is what keeps the building functional, so it's paper towels, soap, toilet paper, light bulbs, anything that keeps the...
Sort of like janitorial supplies?
Basically, it is basically janitorial supplies, yes.
So Will, as I mentioned,
yes,
the non-contingent budget includes an increase over last year's appropriated. The request was for level service. I heard Frank's message at the beginning. It looks like the increase, if you were to just compare fiscal year 17 appropriated to fiscal year 18 non-contingent, is about $12,620, but really it also includes the $23,750 of one-time items from last year.
Right.
So, since you've sort of reallocated that money other places, the overall increase over your operating budget from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 18 under your non-contingent proposal would be $36,370.
Right.
Which, if anybody was watching the Board of Selectmen last night, Mr. Dennehy did include in his budget, and he's going to address a little bit later. But could you talk about how you came to that
Sure.
determination of need, and what would happen if you were held to your fiscal year 17 budget without that one-time number that you were given last year?
Right. So the first part of that, the largest part of that really is the increase in salaries and wages, which was my understanding wasn't counting towards the bottom line, but I could have misunderstood that. That's correct. Okay. So that's a large part of that money.
Okay.
And then after that, in general expenses, there were increases, to electricity. Let's see, electricity, office supplies, and any supplies. We were over budget significantly on office and any supplies, so the current funding would not meet the demand on building supplies, and we need to have, unfortunately, we need to have paper products and everything else for the heavy use of the library. And the other one was dues and memberships, because membership to the Mass Library Association increased. It's not contractual, but it is it's an increase that we need to have.
Okay.
So that's where in the general expenses, those went up. And then the materials budget, which is new equipment line, went up as well to keep us at the 13%. So from 131 to 140.
Oh, and that's to maintain your...
That's to maintain the 13%.
Amy, do you want to jump up here and just address the comment that you made just a second ago? About how the changes to the wage line don't affect the...
So, the way that we instructed the department heads to prepare their budgets are that salary and wages could increase for steps and lanes, which are contractual obligations, and the wage increases that are also in the collective bargaining agreements, but should not include new positions. And that's what Will did in his non-contingent. So that increase you're seeing between the fiscal 17 appropriation and the fiscal 18 non-contingent is strictly wage increases that were agreed to with the unions, combined with step changes.
So in terms of level service, you and Mr. Dennehy don't have any concerns about the way the budget was submitted for the library, in terms of what your request of departments was, right? Sounds like
We had a meeting with Will, and we did discuss those things with him.
Okay.
The library trustees are not under the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
So we cannot tell them to change that, but we certainly will look at those things when we're balancing the contingent and non-contingent budget. We'll have to.
I wonder if you don't mind, if Will and Mr. Dennehy could just pull your chairs to the table and let's have a collaborative discussion for now. Because we don't want to treat different departments differently unless there's a great reason to, right? So if you could help us out with what how you want to call this from each side. We understand that that the library feels as though there are increases in here in order to provide level service, right? And I would love to know before we make a decision, because we're going to vote on the budget, what the town feels as though that would do to other department budgets. Do you feel like there would be an unfairness there or a concern or something that you'd just like us to consider before we did that?
Can I add one other clarification that I think is being missed? Also on his general, we've always kind of considered his books and materials contractual.
Yeah.
Because of the formula. So part of his increase relates to that.
Yep.
Okay, and then he's got stormwater in his non-contingent that I would also consider contractual. So I don't think the increase is as high as it appears by looking at.
36,000.
Yeah.
You've pared it down.
Yeah,
way
I
back.
think we came down to somewhere around 7,000 that we thought maybe the general was above what we considered level. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you.
And
That's
I-
helpful.
And I just want to clarify, I think all the departments, the increase in salaries and wages are not counting towards the bottom line for any, it's not just the library that's going to present this way.
Exactly.
The warrant committee understands
Okay, I just
that, when we're looking at level service budget, we have to discount contractual and steps and lanes and everything else. That, we totally understand that. I was trying to uncover, is there something else here that we're worried about? Okay. And it sounds like we're worried about maybe $7,000 if we're worried at all.
Yeah, and I don't think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the word worried was used.
Okay.
Will and the library trustees have always been a cooperative partner in the budgeting process and trying to balance the contingent, non-contingent budget. So we had discussions when we met with Will last week about, when we're going to look at balancing the budget. This is something that we will look at. But similar to the Board of Health discussion, we didn't ask him to change it. We just made a note that this is something that when we go to balance the town contingent, non-contingent budgets, that we will look at.
Who's over the cemetery? For a
Cemetery.
subcommittee chair?
Right here.
You are? Could you just make a note to double check that Therese included that stormwater increase for fiscal year 18?
She did.
She did?
She
Okay.
did.
Yeah, she did, great.
She did.
So,
It's not 17.
thank you for the, thank you for that digression. So, It sounds like I just want to amend what I said earlier. I asked Will to address what would happen if we paired him back to the fiscal year 17 appropriation, removing about $36,000. It sounds like that would be a terrible idea because that includes a lot of salary and contractual increases. So what would happen if we removed about 7 or whatever this delta is that, you know?
Well, we haven't, the trustees haven't fully discussed or come to any position on this, so there are a number of ways in which we can go, and like none of these have been approved or formally recommended at this time, because after our discussions with Mike and Amy, it was premature to start making official comments. But one of the things that would be discussed would be cutting summer Saturdays, which is about a $12,000 cut to services. That would probably be our least preferable way of doing things. Another would be cuts to the materials budget, which would bring us under the state aid requirement. If we're able to maybe cut a little bit from general expenses. Our electric bill is up, I believe, I have it here, $4,000 over fiscal 17. That was based on conversations with Bill Ritchie about the current contract. We came in under on electricity last year, so we may be able to find some savings in that as well.
Okay.
And since I've mentioned Bill Ritchie's name, and this is a digression as well, Bill Ritchie and Consolidated Facilities have saved the library thousands of dollars over the last several years, particularly in our grounds and building maintenance line. They've in the past, we were replacing heat pumps, which is our heating system, on a fairly regular basis, and last year we did not have to replace any, which was a huge savings to the library and to the town because of the work of Consolidated Facilities. That's just one example of how they help the town and help the library. But I digress.
That's great. Helpful to know, thank you. So what questions do folks have for Will and the trustees? Maybe Mike and Amy. Yes?
On the contingent budget, one of the things that, first of all, thank you for this budget. It's very well written and it gives you a good picture, and it's the best one of these that I've seen from so far this year. It's sort of counterintuitive that as technology increases the ability to download or get stuff from remote, that there's a corresponding increase in need for FTE count.
Right.
So can you speak to that?
Sure. It's really interesting. It's a great question. So what happens is, as a larger percentage of our questions become technology-based, it takes longer to answer them. So if somebody comes in and is checking out 15 books, it takes a couple seconds a book to check out a book. Whereas if somebody comes in and for the first time or second time and says, how do I get this ebook on my device? That could take 15 to 30 minutes. So the transactions take longer and they take up more staff time. There's fewer of them. You can do hundreds of physical checkouts in the same amount of time. But it's as we continue to introduce new digital services, the questions continue to come up. So it's longer per transaction.
And does that smooth itself out after a while?
We hope so. It hasn't yet, only because we've gone from just having ebooks to having e-audiobooks and streaming services. So we would hope so, but we don't see that right away.
Okay. And then on a different, you've got 4 concern areas: programming, tech support, general operations, and outreach.
Right.
Nobody would laugh at the request, but if you could go back to the trustees and maybe prioritize those and put FTE counts next to those in case we're not able to recommend all of those within the contingent budget, but some of them.
Okay.
In a priority order, I think you'd be better positioned to decide which of those in what order than we would do. That'd be real helpful.
Okay. We can do that.
Other questions? Yes,
I guess
Michael?
I'll just raise a question I brought up when we met, which is, why is it that, given that you're in a changing you're getting more into technology, and technology's changing rapidly, wouldn't it be a good idea to have some professional development line in your budget to take care of training your staff to meet new needs?
Mike, I wouldn't disagree with adding more money to the budget, but, so it's a huge need. And like we discussed, this technology reference librarian would be one step towards that, because we'd have a specialist who can then train the rest of the staff. But with the tight fiscal climate over the past several years, we haven't been able to add a line, and we haven't been able to find, we're such bare bones everywhere else, we don't have the money for that. We have used some of the state aid money on occasion to help with some training, but we don't have a regular professional development line. It's a need.
That's my role on this committee, is to find ways to spend more
Add
money.
Add more money to the budget.
Really good at it.
Yeah, very good at it. But I can change over if,
No, let's keep doing it.
if there's no money in the bank, then I'm not gonna.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the question.
Betty?
Can you just talk a little bit more about on page 2, the gift accounts and revolving funds, and how you use those, and whether some of them I know are restricted to a certain kind of use?
Right. So, just kind of taking them in order. The gift accounts programs is money that individuals donate specifically for either a program that you would think of somebody coming into the library, or it could be a program such as a new technology. It's a non-book based related thing. So those gift account donations are most often from the Library Foundation. So the foundation will put it into the gift account and the library will spend it. So this year would have been on revamping technology and furniture in the teen room.
Okay.
The gift account materials is monies that go directly towards purchasing books or other materials. They are often tributes or legacies from families. So they would be books that you would see with a book plaque inside in memory of somebody. Other times, the library has gone to the foundation again. We needed to revamp the French language children's book collection last year. That money was not within the operational materials budget, so we were able to put money into the gift account for materials to fund that as a one-time thing from them. The revolving fund materials is the fine money and lost book money that we collect. That goes directly back into our book budget. That makes up part of that 13%. The revolving fund facilities is lease rent money from the Kidder branch that is leased by Discovery Schoolhouse, and some of it, very small amount, is room rentals at the library compared to the lease amount. That goes directly towards grounds and building repair of the Kidder building. That comes in waves. We can go very well for a few months, and then all of a sudden it's a larger expense, and all of that work is done with consolidated facilities. And then the final thing is the Friends of the Library donations. Another line item that is not in our general expenses or our operating budget is a programming line. All of the programming at the library is funded by the Friends of the Library through donations. So that could be honorariums for speakers, it could pay for concerts, it could pay for the crafts that are done at children's programs, et cetera. So those are what those lines are.
Thanks.
Adam, when you go back, when you go back and talk with the library trustees about prioritizing, as Steve asked, I'd be curious to know also about new materials.
Sure.
Would you prioritize a position over that new materials increase of $30,000?
Okay. We can talk about that. The issue with that increase,
it needs to be in conjunction with the increase.
So that $30,000 increase in the contingent, it's a $40,000 increase basically in the contingent budget. are we looking at?
Non-contingent versus contingent, not looking at appropriated last year,
sorry.
but 140 to 170 is
Yeah,
a
so the
30.
140 to 170, the 170 meets the 13% if we funded all
the
5 of those
positions.
positions. So if you funded 4 instead of 5, if you funded less positions, that number would go down
Yeah,
accordingly.
commensurate, but yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we couldn't choose, well, if we chose to try to fund a position and didn't fund that line, it would create the problem where you wouldn't be able to meet the
That's right.
minimum
But that line
materials
would be
expenditure.
less than the 170.
Okay. Well, this is no small increase under the contingent scenario. So I feel personally pretty comfortable with it because this is pretty similar to the budget that the library submitted last year, and we went over it in depth, but I want to know how others feel about it, if anybody has any concerns about the number of positions or the need for them, et cetera. Yes. No.
You said 3 were approved?
That's correct.
So, but you asked for 5, so how to take us through, if you got 5, how would you go to the personnel board at that time, or?
We've gone to the personnel board twice with this request for the positions, and we're not quite sure what the criteria is for the approval of those positions, honestly. We've researched that with town, with Anne Marie Fagan. I think that Frank might have even talked to Mike about that. Our position is that the director and we as the trustees know the best what the library needs, and we need 5 positions to meet, this budget. I'm not sure if the personnel is voting more on budgets or money, but we can't really distinguish what the criteria is that was used, why they're funding 3 or 3.5 as opposed to the full 5.
So to
They
Chuck's
did approve
point-
some last year, and they approved 19 hours of a specific person this year again.
So as with Amy, what Amy mentioned earlier, and to Chuck's point, if we were to approve the contingent budget as presented here, you couldn't actually fill 2 of those
Right,
positions
we have
until
to
the
go back.
personnel board approved them.
Right. So we would go back to the personnel board.
Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, there's just one comment. When Mike and I reviewed this budget, the 2 things that were very apparent were the stresses were on technology and space. And space in a good way, technology not so much, but space in a good way, in that they have a lot of room to do a lot of really good things, which is contrary to what you see in most businesses where they say, oh, if I only had the room, I could do this and I could do that. Well, they have the room, and they can do tremendous things with this room. It requires staff.
Yeah.
So when you're mulling this over, consider the fact that the staff isn't bringing along capital expenses, okay? That's there, that's in place. We have the room. We don't need to add to it. But we can do a considerable amount of good with the staff. So I just wanted to bring that up.
You just reminded me of something that was dramatized last year when we discussed the library budget, and that was the space actually has, I think it's 3 stories, right?
Right.
In the library, and oftentimes you'll only have 3 staff members.
That's right.
And so if somebody needs to move a floor, then to address an issue, you have a floor then that's unstaffed.
That's right.
And occasionally you have a significant number of sometimes it's students, sometimes it's other people who need attention for various reasons, which creates a staffing problem for the library.
It's a staffing problem and a safety problem, too. Right.
Yeah.
Other comments, questions? Then maybe a motion, if somebody's ready?
I make a motion to accept the budget as is.
Both contingent and non-contingent.
Second.
Michael, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous, with Mark having had left. Okay. Thank you very
Thank you
much
for your
for
time.
coming in. Sorry we're running late.
No, thank you.
Good night. Does anybody need, if you need a break and you want to excuse yourself and come back,
Or if you need chocolate.
or if you need chocolate, grab the chocolate.
Oh, I do.
Passing around bookmarks if anybody
Oh, great.
wants them. Has a library website on it, like I said,
My little,
the presentation's on it.
Germs, he said.
Once we get the librarian, I'll be able to show you.
Always
Oh, yeah, sorry. One person I haven't heard back from is, glad to get that, but the other thing is, I didn't have a budget. It was just after I got your email back that I...
Was there a city
Michael said, oh, yeah, but we didn't have, I hadn't gotten back to the fact. So I was glad I hadn't gotten, I hadn't got his response. Because I would have thought, oh, my husband said,
Michael, do you need a minute?
just one second.
Okay. Why don't, can we take a 2-minute break? We'll be right back.
No, I'm glad you asked me about that, 'cause I,
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Mr. Dennehy is the newest employee on the agenda this evening. We had to haze you by putting you last. I'm sorry about that. And I'm sorry that Amy got caught in the crossfire and had to come early and stay all this time. But thank you both for sticking with us, and appreciate you coming in what got presented last night. Very exciting.
Sure, yeah, thank you for having me. As I said to my wife, I was bookended with the Warrant Committee. We met this morning, the subcommittee, with 4 gentlemen, so I'll end my evening the way I started it this morning, so. But no, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me, members of the Warrant Committee. It's my honor to be here. I mentioned it last night when I spoke to the Board of Selectmen, and the presentation that you just saw from the library is what I was talking about. It's been a very impressive process to go through, having done budgets, municipal budgets before. The fact that it's January 11th, and you can hear a detailed, drilled-down report like Mr. Adamczyk just presented. It's thorough, it's thinking outside the box, it's looking for needs, it's tending to a fiscal fiduciary responsibility, but also being mindful of some of the constraints that are put on people. So, having said that, this is a very preliminary look at where we are today. The expenditures that we've received from all the town departments and boards and committees were at the bequest of my predecessor, Town Administrator Anne-Marie Fagan, and Town Accountant Amy Dexter to my right back in September. They asked the department heads and boards and committees to come up with a non-contingent and contingent budget for fiscal year 18. If you want to hit the next slide there, Mr. Chairman. So, just for the viewing public, all of the boards, departments, and committees were asked to submit this by December 1st. In my previous life, we would not touch a budget till, end of February, middle of March, and pass it through the city council as a department head in April, and then the mayor would pass that budget along to city council sometime thereafter. So it was, I'm very impressed with the timeliness of this. It gives us the ability to take a look at and figure out what we can cut if we need to cut, and we'll get to the numbers later, so I will keep that suspense until then. But just for the viewing public, there's 2 budgets we asked for. The non-contingent budget, which you've been working through both of these tonight, so most of the viewers probably understand it. But this budget was to include expenditure levels level with the FY17 appropriation and add contractual obligations, be it an escalation factor in a 3-year contract they may be going on, or collective bargaining agreements, or steps that employees deserve through that collective bargaining. And then we asked for a contingent budget, which was a little more than that. It's a budget that included expenditures that all these departments, and you heard Will talk about it most recently, but I think Caroline and I caught a piece of Teresa's presentation this evening, that would provide a level of service that would more effectively meet the needs of the town. And I think everyone presented a very good contingent and non-contingent budget to myself, Anne-Marie Fagan, and Amy Dexter, and it's been 2 weeks. Most of them were passed in right on December 1st. A couple came in a little bit later, but I completely understand the pressure that everyone's under. So we'll take a run through the revenues. First, I'll have Amy drive, if you don't mind, just to take a look at where we are on January 11th. And I thoroughly respect the conservatism and the trepidation that comes with putting a revenue estimate together. Again, I came from a place where there was a lot of commercial tax. The tax base isn't what we see in Milton, and the revenue sources that you'll see when you walk through this chart it's, I wouldn't call them limited, but I'd call them, pretty static and something that's not really going to explode from one year to the next. So fiscal management from all the boards and committees and department heads is really important, and I'm seeing that in the meetings with them. So let Amy drive through the revenues, and then we'll get to, where some of the expenditures come in and where we stand on January 11th with a contingent and non-contingent budget.
So let me start by stressing that word preliminary. Very, very, very preliminary. I can't say that enough. We're 6 months into fiscal 17, so I haven't even looked at the receipts for the current fiscal year. It's a little bit early. Probably do that in the next couple of weeks. But if you're on page 3, I'm just going to go over a top level. So total budgeted revenues for fiscal 17, excluding other available funds such as free cash and transfers from other special revenue funds, totaled $92,743,412, compared to budgeted revenues, preliminary budgeted revenues of $95.6 million. This is only an increase of approximately $3 million, or 3.2%. As you can see from the further up on the page, tax levy accounts for the majority of that. Total maximum allowed levy is increasing to $76.3 million compared to $74 million. The majority of that is the limitation, the 2.5% limitation under Prop 2.5, combined with the new growth. The new growth for FY18 is estimated to be approximately $572,000. That figure is from the Board of Assessors. If you move down to local receipts, those are those things like building permits, motor vehicle excise taxes, miscellaneous revenues. Those revenues are being estimated to come in approximately level with FY17. The local receipts piece, the $7.2 million, that's mainly made up, the big pieces of that are motor vehicle excise taxes, which are estimated to be approximately $3.5 million for FY18. That's based upon a 5-year average of fiscal 12 through 16.
Amy, do you remember what it was last year?
16 was 3.9, but that's extremely high, and I have historical data going back, well, I have a spreadsheet going back to 2007, and it's never been that high. Speak to the town treasurer, tax collector. He feels a lot of what's driving that is individuals leasing vehicles as opposed to buying them, so that, if you hold your car for a long time, your excise tax goes down to like $63 a year, but if you lease every 3 years, your excise is going to stay up there. That's why I used a 5-year average and not a 3-year average, because the year before in 15 it was 3.6, and it went up to 3.9. In 14 it was only 3.5, and in 13 it was 3.2. If you look at the historical trends, it's peaks and valleys. So if you have a big peak like 3.9, I would expect that it's going to dip some the following year. So
I understand using the 5-year average makes sense to me, but do you have some concern that 3.5 actually might be too high because there was such a peak last year? Do you think that the valley might be lower than that?
It could.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, it's total guessing game at this point.
It is, and I won't have a read on FY17 because the bills don't go out until February.
Yeah.
So until the bills go out in February, it's just one of those
I just wanted to
revenue streams
register it's a point of concern. So, this everything in here is
Right.
preliminary, but that's something that really could shift.
It could. Is it gonna shift by 500,000? I doubt it, but who knows? But the budget for 17 is about 3.5, so I'm kind of keeping it level where we came in for 17.
Thank you.
The next large piece is licenses and permits, which is mainly the building permits. As you all are probably aware, the building boom in Milton is still going on. And I'm basing that on a 3-year average. The 3-year average is $1,040,000. So I have it in at $1,040,000. Michael and I did discuss that with Joe Prondak, the building inspector, and he was comfortable with that number. He felt that into 18 it would still continue, but wasn't in a position to say it was going to increase a lot. I mean, there's a lot of potential projects out there, but you don't know when they're going to hit. You don't know when it's going to hit the permitting process, so you want to be really careful.
So he's comfortable
With that.
saying that the increase he saw last year is probably sustainable,
Yes.
but maybe no additional increase?
Mhm.
Okay.
So if we're a little over on motor vehicle,
Yeah.
maybe we might be a little under on building permit. That's kind of how
Right.
I look at it, and why I'm always so conservative is because these numbers, total doesn't change much, but, you know, they could swing. The trash fees from the sticker program coming in, 3-year average is $880,000, and 16 was $884. So we're coming in with a budget of $880 on that line item. That's consistent with FY17 estimate. Other than that, the next largest piece is the indirect cost that we collect from the enterprise funds. Is everybody aware with what indirect costs, like what that is? I know there's a lot of new members. So basically, the enterprise funds are the water fund, the sewer fund, and the stormwater fund. And those are self-supporting funds, meaning all of their costs are supported by the fees charged for those services. So your water bill, your sewer bill, and the stormwater utility bill that you'll be getting soon. What isn't budgeted there are things such as my time, Michael's time, the treasurer's office time, the, not just individuals, but our departments, and then a big piece is the group insurance. So there's all kinds of employees, right, that do water, sewer, and stormwater work, but their group insurance is in the general fund.
Right.
So we have to charge back or allocate through the indirect cost allocation a portion of group insurance related to employees that service those funds. So the biggest piece of the indirect cost allocation is the group insurance, because the group insurance budget is $10.5 million, somewhere around there. Selectman's office, central business office, treasurer budgets they're teeny compared to that. So even though across town we may have gotten 2% wage increases, this number isn't going to go up 2% because such a small piece of it is labor. It's more factored on the group insurance. And right now, if you look at the group insurance budget, it's coming in level with FY17. And the reason there is there's a premium increase factored in there, but there's also a premium split change that was negotiated with the collective bargaining agreements to go from 80% town, 20% employee, to 78% town, 22% employee. So that's how that budget's coming in level.
Yep.
So if that budget comes in level, this revenue is going to come in level.
Yeah.
So I have it in at level.
Got it. Thank you.
And then the next biggest piece that I almost forgot last night was the biggest one is the state aid. And at the current time, the state budget is in such the early stages that we don't have a read on there's news out there that the state budget has a huge deficit. We don't know how that will affect state aid to the local communities. So usually at this stage of the game, we're ultra conservative with that, and we're estimating the local aid to come in at 98% of what we are receiving in 17 on the cherry sheet. That's a big number, so if I'm off 2%, that could add another 200, if it comes in level, that could be another 200,000, but it's so early in the game that what we're planning on doing is we're attending an MMA conference in Boston on the 20th and the 21st of this month, and the governor's going to speak as to the points of the state budget, which usually he discusses the aid to the local communities. So we'll get a better idea at that time what this number is expected to do. But to come in even level at this point, I think it's better to come in really conservative and then say, wow, we were off a little to the good, rather than, whoa, we were off a little to the bad. So that's where we are at that one. And then the next piece, if you remember, and again, there's a lot of new people on the committee, so let me just explain this Chapter 70 increase related to full-day kindergarten. In the fiscal 17 budget, town meeting approved free all-day kindergarten, whereas prior to that, it was a tuition-based program. But in order to implement that program, there was what the schools and the town management considered one-time operating costs that were funded with free cash to get the program started. And once the town implemented and had 1 year under its belt of the free kindergarten, that would increase the state aid from Chapter 70. And at that time, that was estimated to be $950,000. At this point in time, preliminary estimates from speaking with Glenn from Pavlicek from the school department, at this time, the best information we have is we're thinking that that's going to come in closer to $880,000 to $900,000. So we're carrying that at $880,000 right now.
And,
So
and the reason why there would be an increase is because the state reimburses towns that have taxpayer-funded kindergarten programs, whereas there isn't a reimbursement available if it's tuition-based.
Right, and Glenn could explain it more, but I think it has something to do with the calculation of the number of students. And if they're paying tuition, those students don't get calculated in the Chapter 70, is that correct? To simplify it?
Simple.
Yeah.
If you pay for tuition, usually kindergartners get counted as half.
Half a
child.
student, right? So they get
If
counted.
they don't pay tuition, they get counted as a full child.
Thank you.
That's the fast version.
So, as you can see, because of the nature of our revenue streams, we're only predicting them to go up about 3%, and most of that's Prop 2.5. So it's very limited. Any questions? Oh, let me talk about the available funds for a second. If you go on down to the available funds section, these are things that we identify from other special revenue funds that, or other available sources of funds that we can use towards the operating budget. The police, that's from the leash law. We always take $1,400. I couldn't really tell you why it's $1,400. It's been that way for as long as I know. The other line item from last year, the $397,445, that was a reduction of the fiscal 16 budget on the reserve fund, if you remember, related to the demolition.
Increase, yes.
And so we just reduced the 16, and it went to fund the same exact purpose in 17.
Yep.
So that doesn't exist in 18. The overlay reserve, that estimate of 160 is from the Board of Assessors also. And then the free cash number, in FY17, the free cash, we appropriated the total free cash that was certified by the Department of Revenue of $2.1 million. But that wasn't all operations. A big piece of that, as I mentioned before, was $950,000 to the full-day kindergarten program, which was non-recurring. Another $800,000 to purchase capital items that were technology mostly technology that we didn't want to bond. We didn't think it was frugal to bond those things, so we used free cash to purchase those, as well as some one-time operating expenses included in the operating budget, like sick leave buybacks for retirements, as well as funding of some one-time repairs and maintenance in the Consolidated Facilities Department.
Can I add a explainer to the Hendry's comment? So the town owns a portion of that building and is responsible for a portion of the demolition, maybe. we have an agreement with the builder that maybe they would take on that demolition in exchange for accepting part of the building. But if that doesn't happen, right now there is money earmarked in the warrant committee budget to, not in the warrant committee, it's in the reserve fund, I think. It's in the reserve fund to demolish that portion of the building. If the building doesn't get demolished during fiscal year 17, and that agreement, you know, we might need to roll that money forward. I just wanted to note
Right.
that money still might need to be carried forward if that building doesn't come down and that agreement doesn't hold up. Were you going to say something, Steve?
What was the certified free cash for 16?
It's like
1.375.
Yeah, 1.4 rounded.
And then on the police with the 1,400, do they account for monies that they get from seizures, forfeitures, that kind of stuff, anywhere in your books? Is that?
You mean like property or drug money, that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
That is, I believe there's a statute that they don't
that's
turn
all
that
off.
over to the town. You'd have to talk to Chief King. And then one other point on the free cash that we have set aside here for 18, that's just sick leave buybacks. We did scan through all of the operating budgets and spoke to the schools and spoke to the different departments. We couldn't identify anything else at this time that we were comfortable recommending free cash for. There are a lot of capital requests out there, and I believe there are maybe some selectmen's articles that might be candidates for that. So I'm
That's
sure.
helpful. Ted and I had to do that last year, so thank you for pulling that out.
Yeah.
Well, we had to ask people as we went through and keep track of it,
Yeah,
so it's
there's-
helpful to have it up front.
It's not a lot there, but again, those separate articles, and then I think you could consider using it for the stabilization funds, but in an override situation,
We'll cross that bridge later.
yes. Let me say potential, because we're so preliminary.
Right, sure. Okay.
Is there any, storm money reimbursement?
Is that coming?
Stormwater?
No, like worse winter?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's not necessary, nothing coming down the pipe yet. There is talk, and we'll find out on the 21st whether, so Chapter 90 fund Chapter 90 money is usually about $200 million statewide. Milton gets 0.3% of that. A couple of years ago, they upped that to $300 million. There's talk that the MMA has suggested to the governor's office that they go back to that 300 number, which would give the town another 0.3% of an extra $100 million. So that's something that we'll also find out on the 21st, hopefully.
Okay.
So a little more money to fix the roads, but no worse winter. So.
So
Other
Amy,
revenue
this
questions, Steve?
1.37 in free cash, where does that show up under available revenues or funds?
It doesn't, because we haven't identified where we will use it. We are only identifying $87,000 in FY '18, because this is the operating items. This doesn't include any
So essentially, she's
capital.
recognizing $87,000 worth of revenue from free cash, having not allocated the rest of it, and there's no corresponding expense yet.
Yeah.
So,
Because we've always, as management, and we have had these discussions with Mike, but former town administrator Anne Marie Fagan and myself and the Board of Selectmen have always felt that free cash should not be used for operating, and it should only be used for one-time, non-recurring things or capital items. So that's why we're only carrying the 87 at this point.
Right.
Once we balance the budget, we'll have more discussions on that, but at this point in time, there's only 87,000 in there.
So just to put a little more color on that, there is between $87,000 and $1.375 million, a big amount of money that will probably be spent on things that are not in these budget pages. So they're capital requests, they're one-time items, et cetera, et cetera. So that revenue will come in, Steve, but it'll have expenses that aren't on the next two pages. Yep.
Back to the question that Chuck answered. that storm, the 2015 storm, my memory was that was declared, the feds declared
Oh, yeah,
an
that's
emergency. And that in the town's past experience, when the feds have done that, there's a two-year lag time. And what, I can't remember who told us, the committee, but it was, it seemed to be the consensus that within 2 years, we might see $200,000 to $300,000. Is that?
You probably heard that from the DPW director. I honestly don't have information on that.
Well, we'll ask him. Are there
So-
angels in the room or something?
There's someone's alarm going off.
In Boston, we received it shortly thereafter, and I think I remember seeing something in the Milton Times that the percentage that Milton got netted out to like $92,000 or $96,000 that year.
It could be that we already got it, but my memories, I'd have to go back and look at my books.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't remember, honestly, it could be in 16 numbers, and I don't have that level of detail in front of me.
Should be in 16's numbers.
So I'd have to go check, but I can get back to you on that. Okay.
Yes.
My recollection was that you asked the question much more articulate than I did. So there was the bad winter, right? And then previous to that, there was another slug of money that we did get in, maybe in 14 or 15. It was like that ice storm.
Very recent.
In the just previous to that. So that's where that conversation came into play.
And I do remember there's some talk about it being quite a lag between the Fed's approval and then the
It was a
whole process
national
of,
disaster.
the Feds deciding that it was in fact an emergency, then we have to submit bills, but in any event, there was some hope that there would be a couple hundred thousand.
So Amy, would you mind looking into that?
Yep, I made a note.
Thanks so much.
Should I email that to you, and then you'll,
I'll share it back with everybody. Thank you so much.
It's that whole 24-hour or 48-hour period where you expended the most. You have to submit those forms to MEMA and then on to FEMA.
I want to say we got it
I
already.
think it was 92 or $96,000.
I'm almost positive, but let me check, and I can find out
I'll get
how
back
much
to you.
it was.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions on revenue? Great.
Right. Thanks, Madam Accountant. So if we turn to the non-contingent page, and we can go relatively quickly through this. Obviously, the second column, not the appropriations column, that just lists the departments or committees. But the FY17 net of one-time is our first column. What we're asking for in the non-contingent is that middle column with the difference out in what would be the right-hand column. If you take those numbers down, and we included consolidated facilities in the town's side of things, you have about $631,000 over what the FY17 appropriation was, net of the one-time money. And look at the school department, again, follow that through. It's, their non-contingent is $2.8 million. What we did was break those two numbers down and take the $630,000 and divide it into the $3.5 million, which is the total, and come up with a percentage, basically. And we've gone back to, this is our second set of meetings with, some of the larger departments on the town side, schools, fire, and police, and said to them, if that $275,000 number, if today was January 21st and the governor told us we were getting a 2% cut in state and local aid, then the town side has to make up $275,000. So we went back to Will, we went back to Chief King, we went back to Chief Grant, and we went back to Director Lynch and said, this is your percentage of that is what we're asking you to sharpen your pencil. So those preliminary discussions have taken place. We also had a very, I would echo Chairman Walker's comments last night at the Board of Selectmen. It was very collegial discussion with the school department. And again, I can't stress the fact that everyone really seems to be rowing in the same direction. So everyone knows what the shortfall is. It's a preliminary shortfall. Right now, we're looking at $1.5 million on the non-contingent. Again, to Madam Accountant's words, if for every percentage, 2 percentage points that the governor and the legislature may give us. That's a couple of $100,000 off of that total, off of the shortfall currently. So if they end up giving us 2% more than they gave us last year, then that number will dwindle to, $1.1 million shortfall or thereabouts. So those are the numbers that we're waiting for to come in for. We've sat with the school department and a lot of the larger town departments to ask them that they take a look at their non-contingent budget, and if this was the number today, and today was, when we present our final budget to the Warrant Committee, then, where are you going to cut and what's it going to mean to you? So that's what the non-contingent budget looks like at this time. Any questions on the non-contingent?
Sorry, yes,
Could
Steve?
you just walk through a little bit?
Yeah.
What the non-controllable 21 million and the non-appropriated 4 million, what comprises those?
Do you want me to take that one? Okay, I'll answer that question. The non-controllable shared departments, that's made up of audit, group insurance, retirement, unemployment, debt service, and the reserve fund, totaling $20.9 million. The feeling is those are non-controllable. If we have to allocate a $1.5 million shortfall, you can't really take it from there because they are what they are for the most
How
part.
about the Blue Hills, which is more of an assessment than anything else?
So-
That's not really controllable either, is it?
Well,
We talked to
Yep.
Assistant Superintendent Pavlicek, and although the number of students may go up or down, the rate for which we pay for each also goes up or down. So it's.
but that's also clearly school,
Yeah.
is why it's classified there.
I think there's 50.
And then the non-appropriated is the state assessments.
Well, there are 50-ish students.
Glenn, if you want to, would you mind coming up to a microphone?
Thanks.
We have roughly 50 students in the Blue Hills Regional School. We're down a couple from last year. So we expect that part of our computation to go down. The assessment per student will go up this year because they're looking at some projects. In fact, we have a meeting
January 23rd.
January 23rd with their board to look at their budget. So we expect the net cost to us to be relatively straightforward. But to Steve's point, it is an assessment. I mean, it's not, we can't say, oh, we're only going to spend 900,000 instead of 909,000. It's a bill.
But it sounds like we're grouping it as a bill into the school budget, just like the library has bills that are not pulled out into the non-controllable. Is that a
So we
fair
wouldn't-
comparison? Because there's other non-controllable
Right.
things in these other budgets above the line.
There absolutely.
Right.
So it was more, at first I had it shared, and then I was asked, or we had it shared, we were asked to change the title of it to say non-controllable also. But they're clearly things that benefit both town departments and school departments.
So within this non-contingent, given that there's appropriations assigned to these general areas of government, is there room in here for capital? Or is it going to be limited to what can be got with that 1.37 less the 87?
Well, any capital that's approved for bonding won't hit in 18.
No.
So,
So we'll just have to work it out through that way.
right, and.
Plus free cash.
Right.
Thank you.
Other questions on non-contingent?
Good. So turn to the contingent budget, working our same way through the columns and appropriations. The percentage of share, if you will, increases more on the town side with that expectancy to improve more effectively to provide the needs that the town wants. So to the point where it's, almost a 6% swing, 5 to 6% swing. So the town side would pick up 23% of the shortfall. The main number is the number down the bottom, that $5.1 million number, which is, again, it's preliminary from a revenue perspective, and it's just a first go-around before we sit down with everyone and talk about what needs to be shaved off each department, both from a general expenses perspective or personnel. So this is our snapshot for January 11th. Obviously, it shall accelerate after the 21st, or we get some of our revenue numbers in for the first half of 17. And then we'll do some re-round of meetings with the town departments and Mr. Pavlicek and his group, and come up with a balanced budget based on where our revenues fall. So.
Can I?
Sure.
I would just like to add something, because I think, and I'm chairperson of the Board of Selectmen, if she were here, just to echo her comments last night, and I'm sure I won't get them right.
She
This
said,
is
quote,
preliminary.
For the media in the room and the viewers at home.
This is not to be taking that the town administrator or the Board of Selectmen or myself, anybody else is saying this is not to be referred to at this point in time as an override. This is a shortfall. We are still working with the boards, committees, and departments to sharpen our pencils and come to a more palatable number. We can't stress that enough.
What was the Warrant Committee override suggestion last year?
2, 3?
3.
2, 3?
It was 2
Between 2 and 3.
I thought I saw 2.9 on a sheet that you sent me today.
Number in my head.
2945.
Okay.
The last one was 3.2.
The last one was 3.4
Taxpayer.
in 2009.
June of 2009 for FY10's budget was $3.4 million
Okay.
So
override.
8 years ago, accelerated, what that would mean in dollars today.
Did that answer your question, Maggie?
I had just asked what it meant in revenue for taxpayers.
We'd have to check with the
About
Board of
like
Assessors.
Like approximately what type of increase would they see in their taxes?
Oh,
Does anyone
Yeah.
know that?
No, but they,
About $125 per.
he does a nice little,
See that?
Yeah.
It's $125 per million if your house is assessed at the average assessed
There's
average.
about 8,000 houses in town, a little over. So a million's going to give you about 125, a little over 8,000, so a little under 125,000, just on a ballpark number.
Right.
Obviously, the houses with larger assessments are seeing a lot more, and the houses with smaller assessments are seeing a lot more. But that's, if you need a
It was like
back of the envelope computation.
It might have been a $600,000 house.
It was.
Yeah, $600,000. Okay. Does that answer your question, Maggie? Okay. And I missed something Chuck was saying.
no,
Did you
say,
get-
I forget the gentleman's name, but he gave us a nice little metric to think
Oh.
about that.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to ask Bob Bushway.
He'll probably do the same thing.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the contingent? I have one at least. One big number that the Warrant Committee, as constituted last year, voted into their contingent budget was for a significant increase for the roads. Yes?
So can I answer that?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so we just received the DPW budgets final, well, we received them, we've been working to fine tune them. So we
Okay.
just finalized them this morning. So these numbers, we did not want to distribute something different from what was distributed last night.
Yeah.
So these were not final DPW numbers, so they do not include an increased appropriation in the contingent budget for roads, but the finalized ones that were sent out today do.
Okay. But I'm talking about the Warrant Committee had a significant number of conversations last year and said, we really want to contribute at a higher level to the roads than we have been. So in addition to whatever increase is likely in the DPW budget, which I haven't looked at yet, the Warrant Committee said, we probably need to throw X number, hundreds of thousands of dollars at the road because we're underfunding them every single year. And so I just wanted to point out that that was a priority for the Warrant Committee last year, and I don't think it's factored into the this contingent scenario at this point.
It is not in these numbers, but it will be when we revise them.
Okay.
But it's not the level you
Not at
guys
the
were
level
looking.
from last year,
It's
yeah.
250,000.
Yeah.
Plus, there's significant requests under the capital committee for review at this time.
Okay. And the Board of Selectmen submitted an article to create a stabilization
We'll kind
fund
of
to
have to
fund the roads.
coordinate
Yeah.
all of that together, but we, did feel it was warranted to at least put something in there, but we struggled with what that number might be within the constraints of what we know today.
Right.
An increase to $300 million in the Chapter 90 money statewide would help.
Yeah.
That would, and as I said, Mass Municipal Association has petitioned, lobbied that to the State House, so.
Okay.
That would get that portion, which we can use quickly. I know Director Lynch and John Thompson have identified streets that they're going to hit in the spring and streets they'd like to hit in the spring, so.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions about the contingent budget? Or any other questions at all?
No, but
Yes.
could I just highlight one thing that I think is important? In this contingent, non-contingent, these two scenarios that are presented here, we haven't addressed the stabilization funds at all either. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. Yeah, and
Putting money in or
as
taking
my
money out.
personal sort of view on that, there have been a number of years where just free cash was used. And if the town, I think that this is along your thinking, if the town is going to be committed to funding the stabilization funds as is necessary, that really should be considered a reoccurring budget item, not dependent upon whether or not you get free cash. So it probably needs to be in the
Operating.
Yeah, the operating version of the budget. Because sometimes you have negative free cash. You should have about 3% according to the Department of Revenue, but you're not supposed to budget any of it. So if you plan to make a contribution to your stabilization funds, it should be in the operating budget.
And so we haven't gotten that
Okay.
far yet. 'Cause
Okay.
that's kind of.
Understood.
It's not departmental, so we haven't gotten there yet, but something we will be talking about.
Okay.
I know what you're
Michael?
going to say.
Yeah, I thought.
Sorry, I was making a note.
No, it's fine. It's good to get the work done. I thought I'd ask a question about some possibilities that came up early this morning. It's been a very long day. 8 o'clock in the morning, we got together and started talking about the town budget on behalf of the citizens. But there was something about a couple of sources of revenue that we aren't getting right now that we might be able to with some law changes, and you could, like, one was zoning
Enforcement.
enforcement that is not collected, but would need to take some sort of I think the proposed some sort of legal change, so I attach those fines to a property tax bill. That was one thing, and then another one was about looking at other towns and the formulas that the state comes up with to.
Sure.
If you want, yeah,
Yeah,
you
so-
could probably say, you know more about this than I do.
Yeah. So very quickly, a couple weeks ago at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, I, for lack of better terms, I kind of poked the bear and asked why Milton's 0.3% is the same as some other municipalities that might not be as close or a gateway to Boston. I mean, our roads are inundated with traffic and vehicles morning, noon, and night. 28 Granite Ave, Adams Street, the people are trying to get to Boston. And the percentage of the algorithm that the state government allows Milton is sometimes less than that of a town further away, a lot further away from our major capital city. But we get a percentage or a tenth of a percentage less than these towns. So I'm going to ask our elected officials to take a look at that algorithm and see if it needs revamping and that we can pick up, I think we got $622,000 last year from Chapter 90 money. But there were some other towns that I won't name that have a similar population with less lane miles to maintain that got $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 more than Milton did. And if they won't change the equation, I'd like an explanation as to why, you know, we see it. People get off the highway and cut through Milton. You know, it's probably a little bit to do with Waze, as Mr. Boynton suggested this morning, but it's impacting our roads and not lasting as quickly. So that was something that we talked about.
I like that question. I hadn't heard that before. That's
Yeah.
nice.
And try to help out. It's an algorithm. I don't think it's a perfect science, obviously. They have to distribute the funds as equally as they think, but I think that there should be another piece of that equation that gives you the proximity to Boston. I don't want the people in Pittsfield and other towns way in western Mass to get mad at us.
I don't think they're watching.
And the other piece, the first part was the enforcement officer, the code enforcement officer, that's in the contingent budget for inspectional services. Having a person to do that while the inspectors can inspect will give the ability to go out and try to fine and collect revenue for some violations that may be occurring in the town with respect to bylaws and zoning.
And we did hear last year that right now we're having to not follow up on some of those things because we don't have a code enforcement officer, but we don't have any sort of a delta or a number as to what that possibly could equal.
Yeah, so in Boston, there's 13 trash officers, and they're revenue generating.
Yeah.
Yeah, they write more tickets than their salary costs them, so that's the something that the building inspector had asked for in his contingent budget.
But Mike,
Jonathan?
you had explained this morning how it's a pretty steep climb, a big jump to actually being able to levy these things, unpaid fines attached to your property taxes and stuff like that.
For years in
That's a-
Boston, there were green tickets written, and they were not collectible. There were no teeth on them. And then they filed legislation at the State House, and those green tickets now are part of your tax bill. So if a landlord in the North End has a resident or a tenant that puts their trash out early, they get a $25 fine. Years ago, that green ticket would just float through the streets of Boston. Now that gets attached to the landlord's bill. It probably gets passed on to the tenant through a rent increase or a deposit, but at least there's accountability and there's a stream of revenue coming through.
Glenn, did you have something?
Just to say, if you're looking at algorithms, why Milton is assessed the same amount of money by the MBTA as Quincy is a mystery to anyone who's ever been on the T. And it is, again, one of those algorithms that, you know, the three buses that go through Milton without basically stopping and the Mattapan extension are the same as Quincy Adams T Station, Quincy Central T Station, Wollaston, North Quincy. Who figured this out? But, and it's a, that's enough.
I also think it might be true of Braintree, too.
Yeah, if we want to.
Clear more on the MBTA and the FAA.
If we're going to ask for algorithms to be looked at, there's one of my favorites.
You wrote it down, Glenn.
Yeah, don't poke the bear, right?
Any other questions? I have one more.
Yes.
We would love for you to give us your opinion on a stormwater issue that came up earlier, where the cemetery submitted a reserve fund transfer to cover their unexpected stormwater fee for 2018 or 2017. For 2017, because when those budgets were put together, we didn't know the stormwater rate, so they weren't included in the budgets. We asked the library informally and the schools, and they're going to try to absorb that stormwater fee within their budget. Cemetery didn't feel like they could. It was noted that they have a lot of land, obviously, so they might be disproportionately affected, but there are the parks as well out there and roads and whatnot. So I'd love for you guys to go off and think about that, and then let me know. Maybe you could look at the total number of stormwater fees across town and school, and what that equals, and if it would, you know, kill our reserve fund for us to save a couple of departments that might need help, or if we should just suggest that they all try to absorb it and then we deal with it after the year, you know, concludes.
So from a town side, we're consolidating that bill through Consolidated Facilities. We're just going to send one bill to Bill Ritchie for Consolidated Facilities, and he'll distribute or invoice police, fire, DPW for their portion of it. But we'll go back and look at
But that's how we did it for 18.
Yeah.
But for 17, that
You
would
have a
even be
bunch of
hard for
budgets,
him
yeah.
to do it. But the separate boards and committees and schools
Yeah.
all have to handle their own. Trace's is kind of high compared to her operating budget.
Yeah.
But she does have all those other funds, so we can definitely look into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else or Mr. Dennehy or Ms. Dexter? Thank you both for coming in, really appreciate it. You're going to be back
February
1st to give a full presentation. We encourage the schools, the library, everybody else to come in and talk about that. It'll be a more full-blown contingent, non-contingent discussion with much sharper pencils having been applied, because you'll have a few weeks to work on this.
Yeah, so we have a busy time between the 21st, and we hopefully get our numbers and coming back here on the 1st. But again, been working great with all the departments and the committees they're aware of where we are, and Will spoke about it tonight. They know where they need to sharpen their pencil.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be back.
Thank you.
So, and again, the due diligence that goes on this table needs to be commended. I mean, I watched the Board of Health and a piece of the cemeteries and saw Will's testimony live, and the questions that are raised are very relevant, and I appreciate it, and it's part of the whole process that I'm very impressed with, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before you make a motion, one quick comment. Steve, would you please make a best effort tomorrow morning to see if you can get your subcommittee with DPW between Friday and Wednesday? And if you can't do it, you can't do it, and we'll push that off. But we have a sort of nightmare scenario of articles coming our way, and we're going to have to add in some Monday night meetings in order to make our printing deadline. So if you could just make a little effort, talk to your...
I know I'm not going to, just because of things I've got to get done at
Okay.
the office, I'm not.
All right, so then we'll push off DPW. I'll find a different place to put it in. We're slotting in town clerk next week already because she needed to reschedule. So we'll have a slightly shorter meeting next week than we were planning, but it'll still be a good size meeting, and we'll have to fit DPW in another night. Okay?
Thank you for getting
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Any all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.